Is everybody here? Is anybody here? I'm sure that's not creepy at all. And you're like, but Trent, we can't see you. I'm like, I know that. I know that. I've spent the last 45 years setting up this, what do you call it? Scene? Is that what it's called? Whatever. Thing. Doohickey. What if I then transition to this, a slightly lighter black? Well, then it wouldn't be black. It'd be like a dark gray. But like, ooh, now there's like a gray square in the middle, right? It could be anything. There could be anything behind that black square. But you know what's actually behind there? Get ready. Okay, I want you guys to clench really hard and squeeze your irises down really tight because I'm gonna pull the cover off the camera and it's gonna get really bright. So I don't want you guys to be all like blinded by the light or whatever. Hi, everybody. So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, wow, welcome to the channel. This isn't my channel, actually. This is Arv's channel. And he's the one who usually streams here, but he's picking up his kid from camp right now. So that leaves it to me to talk about the Kickstarter that we're running. What Kickstarter, you might ask? Well, okay, it's a Kickstarter, duh, called Grayshade. Well, I mean, that's part of the title. I'm forgetting the exact title, the full thing. Anyway, Grayshade is the primary focus of the thing. Now, he wrote a novel called Grayshade. Wow. And then there are two more novels called Renegade and Heretic that are going to be coming after this. So it's basically going to be a trilogy. But right now, there's a Kickstarter going on, and there will be, what do you call those things? Links to them in the chat as people chat. You probably type exclamation point, if I remember this correctly, exclamation point Grayshade KS, I think is the command for it, I believe. I'm sure the mods will probably already have it on the screen because I can't really see chat right now. However, that covers the novel that's already been done, the two novels that are going to follow it. It's going to cover a 5e compatible tabletop RPG that is set in the world of the novels. Thank you. Wow, off to a great start. And then the audiobook, which I will be narrating, which I've kind of already done twice. But it was several years ago, and I had done it once, and as we were like basically getting ready to release it, things kind of went higgledy piggledy, and we had to kind of shift gears, and then I had to redo it, and then everything kind of went higgledy piggledy, and I had to shift gears, and now we're redoing it again, or at least I'm redoing it again. The book has been written for a while, and it's been out for a fair bit, but so let's look at what we're going to be looking at today, and that will be narrations and how I go about doing them. So this thing up here is Adobe Audition. Now that's what I use to do my narrations. Different people use different things. When I started out, I used a piece of software called Audacity. It was free. It was more than enough for what I needed. It was very, very, very kind of simplistic, but it did the things I needed it to do. And then there's a second piece, which is more powerful, called Reaper, that some people use. And it is much more powerful than Audacity is. It is also, if I remember correctly, it's been several years since I've looked at it. It's kind of free. If I remember correctly, the devs are fine with you using it as long as you don't make more than $20,000 a year with it. If you do, they're like, hey, if you're making like a bunch of money with our software, could you please maybe throw a little money our way? I think that's a perfectly reasonable ask. So then there's this one right here, which is Adobe Audition. I'm going to turn on my fan because it's very warm in my room right now. Adobe Audition, which is part of the Adobe Creative Suite, and then there is probably the industry standard for anybody who wants to do voice acting in the big leagues is Pro Tools from Apple, and yeah, that thing is a beast. It is a monster that does way more than I need, and I'm not all that familiar with like Apple products, so I don't know it very well, and I'm kind of intimidated by it. So I just go with this. Probably could have gone with the Reaper, honestly, but there was a point where I thought I might be doing videos years ago, and I thought, okay, if I go with the Creative Suite, I'll also have access to Premiere and to After Effects and everything. I never did that because, that would require a sense of commitment and stick-to-itiveness. And anyway, so years ago, Arv asked me, hey, would you please narrate my book? And I said, yeah, of course I will. And so he sent me a copy of the book, and I narrated it, and now we're back here again, as I said. The one you're seeing here, that's directly above me, is the first time I recorded it. And you can see how the waveforms are very, very tiny, right? They don't come up off the zero line, which is that middle red line that you can't really see. But I'll see if I can zoom this in a bit and show you what I mean. In the you have this center line here that is basically where you're at, like absolute, not absolute zero. That's a temperature, and it's very cold, very cold. Probably colder than I like, and I like the cold. Um, so basically, when you get down to that point, you can't hear anything. It's like silence at that point. Now this, when I was recording, I was on a different microphone. This was recorded using Audacity, and so it's much quieter than the stuff that I produce now, and I'll show you what I mean. The other thing is that you'll hear, like, when I finish saying a word, you'll hear like a hiss that dies off. It'll be like, and it's gone. That was because I didn't know what I was doing. There is room noise in everything that you do. There's always room noise. It may be incredibly quiet, but it's there. And so when you make a recording, you go through and you collect what is called room tone. And I'll show you what that sounds like. We'll go ahead and create a new file here. New audio file. I don't care what the thing is. So if I just start recording right now, you can see the bumps on the line, even when I'm quiet. And that's like the sound of the fan, just the general noise in the room. But it's fairly low, fairly quiet. And part of that is because I am not sitting on the mic, but I'm not on the mic. I'm not facing it the way that I should be when I'm narrating. When I'm narrating, it would look like this. And so the waveforms are much more, I mean, my voice overall is much more louder or something. And I'm way over here now, so it's not really in the center of the thing. But you have to find that sweet spot, that middle point where you're not too quiet and you're not too loud. Usually that is between -12 and -9. Let me see if I can give you a -12. A -12 would be somewhere about here. You see that highest peak right there was -12. And if I start shouting, if I'm like, look out, that was way louder. That is what you see there. Okay, let's talk about this piece. I'm going to wind up getting kind of a shotgun pattern of data for you guys, just because it's going to be craziness. So you can see how this goes off the thing at the top. That is what we call a square wave. Even if I try to turn it down, it's still going to be kind of cut off. So I'm going to lower the thing, and you can see how the top of it is just flat because it went way too loud and the thing couldn't record any. It just cut everything off the top. You never want that to happen, ever. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of this and delete it again. So between -12 and -9 is usually a very nice thing. If you get above -3, you start getting distortions and things just don't sound very good and you have no room to work beyond that. But you stay between -12 and -9, you're good. Let's see. What else can I tell you? I had mentioned in the tweet that I was going to lightly touch on hardware because I am not a hardware guy at all, whatsoever. But there are a few things that I do know. If you're going to be plugging in your microphone, which if you intend to do any kind of voice acting, you should probably plug in your microphone. I know that much. You want to make the shortest possible run from your microphone to your next device. You want the cable to be as short as possible, because what you don't want, and I told myself, hey, Tren, make sure you've got a cable nearby that you can use as a visual aid. Do I have one? No. Anyway, oh wait, there's kind of one, sort of, still wrapped up in its thing. Anyway, I can't, it's got this Velcro strap around it, and I can't, there it is. I can find it. Okay, so you have a microphone cable. What you do not want to do, ever, when you're using that, is you don't want to, if it's too long, wind it in a loop, because then you've got electricity going around in a copper loop, and that you're basically going to create an electromagnet, and that's going to put a lot of line noise into your recording. Don't do that. And I may need you again later, so sit over there. So that's why you want the shortest possible run on your, get the shortest cable you can to make it from point A to point B. You're going to have a much easier time. You're going to have a bad time. Right. So, like I said, I'm not going to talk about the mechanics of it, the hardware aspects and elements of it, but I am going to talk about, like, my process, how I do what I do, and how I go about figuring out what I want it to sound like. For any voice actor, we have a script. It doesn't matter what we're doing, whether it's IVR, which is like phone trees, like when you call somebody and they're like, please stay on the line, and whatever. That, or video games, or audiobooks, or animation, whatever. We're going to have a script to work with. Sometimes that script is very flat. It is not intended to be a performance. Like, for example, if you are narrating technical documents like medical text or pilot training manuals or whatever, that doesn't require, you don't have to do that in a character voice. You just have to be able to communicate information clearly and plainly and not put people to sleep behind the wheel. Because, I mean, if you've got a construction worker who wants to be a pilot and they have to drive 2 hours to get to their construction site and then 2 hours to get back home, that's 4 hours. They could be studying their, training manuals to become a pilot, but they can't because they're driving. And so it then falls to you to be able to read that manual to them without putting them to sleep while they're driving. But it has to be engaging enough to enable them to absorb and process the information. So if you're one of those people who's worried about, I can't do all these crazy voices, you don't have to. There are plenty of books out there that need to be narrated that don't require character. But if you go to a studio in Burbank and you're standing there in front of the microphone, you open up the script and it's got, all of your lines, everybody's lines presumably, but it's also going to have stage direction. It's like, it's got to be, this kind of a sound. We want this sort of thing. We want this sort of voice. He's laughing at this point, whatever. That's not how audiobooks are written, but there are still pieces of stage direction It's just in narrative form rather than in stage direction form. Because it doesn't matter what kind of voice acting you're doing, if it's audiobooks or animation or video games or whatever, it is always a performance. In the case of technical documents, it's just a very flat performance. But, excuse me, it's not an in-character performance. So, as far as I'm concerned, you go through and you read the book all the way through, from beginning to end, the whole thing, before you record a single word. That's what you do. And I'm realizing, as I'm doing this, that I'm not seeing chat moving at all. So, let me see if, okay, yeah, there's plenty of stuff, but there, okay, yeah, chat is there. It's just, people have been asking questions, and I have no idea that they've been talking, because it didn't update. Bastard. Not you guys. You guys aren't bastards. It's just that you need me to be a little loud. Okay, look, it just chat was not visible to me until just now. So need some more volume. Okay, well, we're pretty much at the top of what I can do with volume, I think. Let me see if I can turn this up a little bit more. That is as high as the gain goes. It doesn't get any higher than that. Of course it was better when I was near the microphone. I wasn't, sitting a foot and a half away. Okay, so it's probably a lot better like this. Right? I couldn't see you because for whatever reason, chat was not updating on the thing. It just was my comment from like 5 hours ago where I was like, only got 5 hours left. Anyway, what was I talking about? You guys probably don't know because you couldn't hear me that well. Reading the whole book before you record a single word. That's what I was saying. Because it is important not only to know where the story begins, but also to know where it ends and how it gets from point A to point B. Because as I heard someone say, and I can't remember who it was, if you know the main character dies at the end, it changes the way you say once upon a time at the beginning. So you have to know the story, maybe not to the incredibly granular level that the author does, but you've got to know it. You've got to know who the characters are, what their motivations are like, because what their personalities are, because you're not going to be able to portray those personalities. It would be like doing a performance of Shakespeare without studying the script, without researching the characters and understanding who is Hamlet and why is he doing the crazy stuff he's doing. You have to understand the piece that you're trying to perform, or you're not going to do a very good job at it. So that's kind of where, whenever I talk to people about narrating audiobooks, that's sort of the side that I talk about. People who come to a convention and they're at a voice acting panel about doing audiobooks, and they're like, what kind of microphone do I don't know. I don't really do hardware. There are plenty of people around who could tell you, okay, for your particular type of voice, you're going to need this kind of microphone, and you probably, because of that, that pairs well with this particular type of interface, blah, 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 whatever. Me, I focus on the performance elements of it. And you have to consider it a performance. If you don't, it's going to come across as very kind of, the emotion, the impact is not there. Hamlets and bacon. I too like bacon. In fact, my housemate, granted, he was making a salad earlier and he took the last of the bacon. But that's okay. I didn't want any. So I don't know what the heck's wrong with me that I didn't want bacon. Anyway, hi, Fox. So, right, the performance elements of it. You go through and you read the story from beginning to end. You have to know where the character is when they are stressed, when they are happy. It may not say in the text or the stage direction that he laughs, or especially even if it does, or especially if it does, it says that this character laughs, but you don't see written in the quoted text, ha ha ha, I would never do such a thing. It just says, I would never do such a thing. But it says, so-and-so laughs, I would never do such a thing. Even though the ha 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 isn't written there, still do it. It becomes an element. I mean, it could be worked into the thing. It would be like, I would never do such a thing. But it brings the laughter into it. It gives the line the jovial quality that it should have. And it makes the character just that much more alive. Command's broken? I have no idea. I don't know. I would presume that it was ! Grayshade KS, because that's what it's been for like a month, I think. Yes, and we can post the link. Thank you, Garlic Tofu. Unless it's a villain. Well, no, not necessarily. Villains, one of the great things about villains, the best villains, is they're relatable. If you can't relate to a villain, it just doesn't come across very well. I mean, it comes across as a villain, but not a good villain. A good villain is somebody that you're like, oh, damn, I can see his point. Shit. Or her point, their point, whatever. Doesn't necessarily have to be a guy. Uh-oh. Right. So, I don't know how to fix that. You guys, you mods, you, I guess, can, yeah, stuff. So, like I said, this is the blank doohickey. What doohickey thing? The Adobe Audition, the blank file that I created for this whole thing. We'll come back to this. So, like I said, when I first started out, this was how I recorded it. When I went back for the second attempt to record it, things came through a little better. I had a better microphone. I was finally using Adobe Audition, and the clarity and the fidelity of it was much better. And that would be, if you look at the waveform, you compare it from this to this, there's a lot more richness to it. And if I start playing this one, wait a minute, I don't have the volume up on, I have this thing muted. It really doesn't help if I don't have it. Okay, yeah, the Audition is no longer muted. So earlier, when I was telling you, do you hear that hiss, that and you couldn't hear it? It's because I had it muted. Crap. Maybe I should show you what I was talking about. So, we come down in here, and if you listen, you become its master. You must always choose love, the first rite of devotion. I think you could see it that time, or hear it at least that time. But when I did it the second time around, I got much better at capturing room noise, and it just works better this way. Part 1, Black. By hating death, you become its servant. By loving it, you become its master. You must always choose love, the first rite of devotion. So, when R first approached me, he was like, can you read this part? And it was kind of like the audition for it. I mean, he knew he wanted me to do it anyway, but this was still kind of an audition-y sort of thing. And I was like, yeah, sure. Here's this thing. And he was like, it's good. It's really good. But could you read that line more like this? And that's something that maybe not a lot of audiobook narrators get. They don't get as often direct back and forth interface with the author the way that Arv and I have. So I can get not immediate, but pretty close to immediate feedback. I send him a file and I'm like, give this a listen, let me know what you think. And so every time as I was recording a chapter, I would send it to him. He would listen to it and be like, okay, I really liked this. This character shouldn't sound this old. Not that guy, obviously. And it's just like, we slowly whittled things down to the point where we had what we wanted to, let everything sound like. Let everything sound like? Yeah, sure. That's a phrase. Chapter 1. It's amazing how long it can take someone to die. That line, I think Arv and I went back like 3 times on, because the first time I read it, I had it in a much darker, kind of like you're standing over a body looking at them. It's like Paul Rubin's death scene at the end of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You're like, God, it's amazing how long it can take someone to die. And kind of thing. It's like he's like, no, not that, not that cold, not that dark. Bring that up a little bit. We gotta, and then so he explained to me how things were going. I started to really understand more about the character and whatnot.
Or, to be exact, how long it can take someone to die if you're careless. Most people like to talk about the human body like it's a piece of glass. Breathe on it the wrong way and it'll shatter. Not that I mind. Talk like that makes my work a lot easier. But it's all nonsense, honestly. All children's stories and drunkards' rantings, and from people you'd think would know better. The worst are the soldiers. Get them home from a war, and most will swear to you that they saw friends of theirs get cut in half by a single arrow, fall stone dead after one knife thrust to the knee. This while sobbing into mugs of mead, slobbering apologies about what bad people they are. This is what war does to you. You ain't seen it, so you can't know.
I know people like that. Having been in the Army, I know soldiers who are like that. And as soon as I read this, I was like, oh, man. Just like, crap. Okie dokie. I mean, I have known people that, I've known soldiers, Marines, sailors, whatever. You get them drunk, and they become morose and just bitter and self-loathing. It gets really, really uncomfortable to be around them. But at the same time, there is an exaggeration because they see themselves as monsters in a lot of cases. It's like, well, I mean, you were required to do monstrous things, no doubt, but and it can be a very uncomfortable moment. But so I immediately identified with the kind of person that Grayshade was talking about in this particular moment. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I know people like that. Okay, well, crap. At least I know how to. Having been someone who is talking about people like that, I'm like, don't worry, I know exactly how to voice act this part. It's fine.
Nonsense. And boring nonsense, too. Oh, soldiers know how to kill. Some of them have gotten so used to hacking at strangers for king and country, they don't know how to do anything but kill. But they forget how hard it actually was when they were doing it. How the body they were hacking at kept staggering on a long time after the brain should have shut down and the person long since finished. Everyone talks about how many people die in war, but I've always been more impressed with how many live.
That also, because I was a medic in the Army, so I understand what that's like too. The body really doesn't want to die, and so it will fight and fight to stay alive most of the time. And so I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what that's like too. Um, right? Uh, okay, no, I can do this. I can absolutely do this. I'm identifying with all this stuff way too easily, but yeah, I can do it.
Maybe a few fall quickly. Lucky sword slash to an artery, spear to the throat, but most just fight on, like dogs in a pit, cut, bleeding, hanging on to whatever worthless life they've got left.
Life suing, I believe, if I remember correctly, you are talking about, or you are specifically quoting uh, the movie Serenity in the end when Kaylee finally realizes that Simon wants to be with her. You mean to say sex? And I want to live. And she cocks the gun. And, oh, that's such a great scene. God, Jewel State is a treasure. Okay.
Yes, people die slowly if you leave them to it. The body doesn't want to die. It's made to heal, to adjust, to get better. So it pays to be careful, to do the job right the first time. Details matter. You can only put together the large puzzle with the small pieces.
The hell is that? That is Grayshade's mentor, Chaosthenes. And the first couple of lines of his that I read, I was like, okay, I don't have a feeling for this guy's voice. It wasn't until I like when Greg told me what the description of Chaosthenes was like, I was like, oh, okay, I think he's probably going to sound like this. Yeah, that's probably what it's going to be. And I was like, and as soon as he heard it, he's like, yes, that's what he sounds like. Okay, good. We got that locked down. That's Chaosthenes. Good to go.
Chaosthenes always said, and like everything he taught me, it seemed silly at first, a child's rhyme. But he was right, of course. Chaosthenes was always right, except once. And that time was my fault.
Foreshadowing. Or retroactive foreshadowing. Hindsighting. Kind of both, maybe. One thing that is also important to remember, like a lot of times when I tell people, if you know the main character dies at the end, it changes the way you say once upon a time at the beginning. A lot of times you can get a really good hint as to whether or not the main character is going to die in the end, especially if the book is told from their perspective. If they are telling the book in first person retrospective, they have to have survived throughout the entire book, or otherwise they wouldn't be alive to tell you about it after the fact. So, a little bit of a cheat, and you know, can kind of spoil the ending of a novel, and you're like, oh my God, is he going to live? Of course he is. He's the one telling the story. If he wasn't alive at the end, he wouldn't be able to tell you what happened. So that can be a little... Why are you ruining it for me? Shut up and listen.
Slight clattering echoed in the street to my right, and I lowered myself into a crouch as I turned my head in the direction of the disturbance. For the past 2 hours I had been standing in the shadows, concealed behind a series of wooden crates stacked across the street from Ashenza's house, just past the intersection of Velman and Commerce Streets in the merchant district of the great city of Corel. This was early for the guards to change their shifts, but I was in no mood to take chances. Yet, as I peered around the side of crates, I saw nothing more than a man taking a few stumbling steps down the street before lurching out of sight into an alleyway, a slurred tune drifting from him as he went.
There are elements of, what do you call that stuff? You know, the stuff that I'm trying to talk about. Setting. Things that are going on in the scene that aren't directly in the character. I mean, this is something that's going on down the alleyway, down the street from where Grayshade is sitting watching this house. And when I first, read this part, I was like, oh, is this somebody important? Is this, some character that's like, that's pretending to be drunk or whatever? And it turns out, no, it's not. It's just a drunk staggering through the street, singing some song. And he's in the scene and he's out. And some people, when they write or when they read, they don't like things like that. They don't like things that don't feel relevant to the story, but it is incredibly relevant because it tells you what the city of Corel is like at different times of the day. It's like, the two guys standing in the thing and a tumbleweed blows by. A tumbleweed is important. It tells you what the terrain, the setting is like. And if you don't have it, the world becomes very sterile and it doesn't feel alive. You go through, I guess it was, what's the game with the Char, and I don't remember any of the other races' names because the Char are really hot. Guild Wars. If you were walking around in Guild Wars, and a little bit, I think, with Final Fantasy, as you're walking around, you will hear NPCs talking back and forth. And it gives this city a sense of, vivaciousness, life, whatever you want to call it. And the longer the reason that Guild Wars was the first one that came to mind is that when I was playing Guild Wars back in the dim times before we had internet, okay, maybe not that far back, but it was when Guild Wars first came out, I had gotten out of the Char city, the Black Citadel, I think it's called, and I'd gone around to the back, and there were like these two very young Char kittens, and they're sitting by a drain or a well or something, and the two of them are talking about the singing that's coming, and they're like, ghosts aren't real. Those are the things. Like, but then where's this singing coming from? And the little male char is like, your butt. And I'm just like, oh my God. It was just, and of course she's like, ew, incredibly adorable. And it brought, and it was tucked way back in the middle of nowhere where, almost nobody would ever go unless they're running around the edges of the map trying to unlock the whole thing. But it's little details like that, whether it's in a game or it's in a book, that give this sense of life to the setting. Really makes it work. Oh, it is adorable. I actually have, if you go to my YouTube channel, don't do it right now, obviously. Way back in the list of videos, you'll find it. It's I took a clip of it. It's very, very cute. Anyway, continuing on.
I vaguely recognized it as one of the newer tavern songs. Something about a wench and her loose-fitting clothing, though tavern music isn't my stock in trade.
Now, in the current version, the current rewrite of the thing, it doesn't mention the wench. There's no mention of a wench in that line at all. It's just something about loose-fitting clothing. And what I like about that being in the rewrite is that the guy's probably slurring. He's way down the thing. Grayshade's got other shit he's trying to focus on. He's not paying attention to the words. And so all he hears, he doesn't hear the part about the wench. It's just something about clothing or whatever. And he just dismisses it. It's that this is not relevant to what I'm doing. And I like the fact that the information that he's got now is less complete than what we had in earlier versions of the novel. I really like that idea. Never forget the wenches. Oh, wenchkin. Yeah, I guess that's true. Anyway.
And I frowned, concealing myself from some wine-drenched worker stumbling by after wasting his week's pay on a few hours of forgetfulness wasn't necessary. After all, his own sorrows were more than enough to drown out my presence.
Because it's not just about the fact that Grayshade doesn't hear everything the guy is saying, but the guy is completely unaware of Grayshade's presence because it doesn't really matter to him. He's focused on his own drunkenness and whatever song he's singing. So there's kind of a reflection. It's a weird, dingy, gross, grungy mirror, but it's still there. Now, one thing that people have noted, the differences between how I do performances, audiobooks and whatnot, is that I tend to leave the breath sounds in. So you'll hear me take breaths throughout the...
I must admit, there was more than one time I wouldn't have minded trading places with one of those drunkards, at least for a little while. Their lives might have seemed empty and pointless, but at least their issues were their own. What would they have done if they had to solve everyone else's problems but theirs?
I am of the opinion that in order for a performance to have life, in order for it to feel like a living, literally breathing performance, it must have breath. If it's like way too much, like if, for example, I am allergic to penicillin. If I take some, my breathing becomes that is too much. That is too much breath. Or if, in a less exaggerated thing, if I'm doing a narration and I get to a point where I've, like there's a really long, authors sometimes do not think about the fact that this may someday have to be spoken aloud. And so they will write big, long sentences that you're like, where the hell am I supposed to take a breath in this? You work it out. You figure out how to do it. But if there isn't really a spot where you can readily split the sentence to take a breath, you wind up with this run-on sentence that just keeps going and going and going, and you get to a point where you're like, and that is a bit extreme. You don't want a breath in the story to be more than, just something nice, subtle thing, somebody who's taking a breath, between sentence segments or whatnot. The way I try to explain it to people is imagine that, in like a D&D setting or whatever, you're part of a caravan that is going from here, Hardcastle, up to here, Unterlass. I don't even know if you can't see my hands. Why am I doing that? Because, like, right here is the edge of the map for you guys. That's great, Tren. All right, so let's say instead that you are going, you probably can't hear me because I'm way the hell back here. Anyway, you're going from point A to point B. You're with a caravan. You guys have been walking all day long. You stop, circle the wagons, set up your fires, cook your meals, sit back, having some ale, whatever, a little bit of music, and then somebody sitting across the fire from you starts telling a story. Or they're sitting next to you, whatever. As they are telling you that story, you're going to be able to hear them breathe. Breathing is a necessary tool for conveying emotion, for conveying pacing, especially pacing. It's huge for pacing. And some people are like, yeah, for the characters, dialogue moments where the character is talking, sure, you should be able to hear them. But the narrator, you don't have to do that. I'm like, yeah, you do. Well, in my opinion, you do. The narrator is as much a part of the storytelling as anybody else, and so it is important to be able to hear them when they breathe, as long as it's not too egregious. It's also very important for not being dead. Yes, Arudinel. A lot of people who narrate, especially in the last probably 10 years or so, and I think part of it is probably with kids who are doing YouTube videos or TikTok things where they edit things incredibly tightly, where it's just this jump cuts constantly. And they're trying to cram as much information into as short a period of time as possible. And so they wind up cutting out all of these breath sounds, or they're using modules that plug into things like Pro Tools and Audition that remove sibilants or remove breath sounds or clicks or whatever. A lot of it, especially clicks and whatnot, because as you're talking, you will start generating bubbles in your spit and they start popping while you're talking. We, just listening to each other, we usually don't hear it or we screen it out. But when you listen to a recording of something, oh man, does it show up. We hear it constantly. Those, when I go through and edit, yeah, I remove those. Because those are just like, my God, do I have Pop Rocks in my mouth? What's going on here? It's not quite that bad, but it can be. But breathing is important, especially, like I said, with pacing. If you're dealing with, when I'm reading MechWarrior or BattleTech stuff, you go through, and if you've got a scene where the mech warriors are sitting around, they're talking, they're relaxed, they're not fighting anybody or anything, and they're just talking about stuff, the pace is much more relaxed. It can be much slower, especially if it's like an emotional conversation between two people that they're talking about their feelings. Mech warriors talking about their feelings. They do it sometimes, like on Founding Day or something. Anyway, during those times, the pace of narration is slower. It's more deliberate. It's easier, and so the breathing isn't quite as jarring, as we said earlier. Once we start getting into combat, I narrate faster, and I talk faster because I'm trying to keep the action really, really moving, and almost too fast to keep up with. Almost. Because I want people to be like, wait, what's going on? Like they can't quite keep up with the action. It's just right on the edge of their ability to I want them just gripping the wheel, like, God, just bordering on like a panic attack, because it makes the intensity of the scene feel real. I love doing that. I love it so much. It's a lot of fun, suffice to say. So, yeah, I leave in breath sounds. I remove pops and clicks and things like that, unless they're supposed to be there. Like, if the text specifically describes that someone is, like, their teeth are chattering, or, like they're really cold, or or maybe they're eating something. Actually, I got a review on a book that I did a while back where one of the characters was eating breakfast. He had toast and he was dipping it into the yolk of his like easy eggs, and then he was just eating it. And so I was like, okay, fine. And I went to the kitchen and I made a piece of toast and I brought it back and I sat down in front of the microphone and I had like some jelly or something so there would be a moist part to the chewing so that it would sound kind of like the egg yolks and whatnot. And I was just sitting there eating what because the guy's talking with his mouth full, not full, but he's eating and talking at the same time. And I'm like, that's what I'm gonna do. And somebody who I think it's actually the most recent review, they were like, I can't. Just he's eating while he's doing. I'm like, that's what's going on in the story. Of course, that's what I did. It just makes sense to me to do it that way. It evokes the scene much more clearly. Anyway, let's get back to the thing and we'll talk about more of what's going on in this recording.
Who would they have turned to for aid? The fences who lent them money for another spin of the Sennen wheel? The women who pretended to be more interested in their worries than their wallets? The bartenders who listened to them pour out their failures over just one more flagon, one more item added to an unpayable sheet of debt? I shook my head in annoyance. Self-pity is the least helpful indulgence, I remembered Chaosthenes telling me once. No one can help you with a problem you only tell yourself, and you can't help yourself solve the problem if you're wasting time complaining about it.
So, many of you know I'm a furry, and furries, some of them, are really, really bad about that. About they spend more time complaining about a problem than actually putting any effort into fixing it. And I have very little patience for people like that. So I'm reading. The first time I started reading this, I had read the book already. Like I said, you got to read the whole thing before you start recording. But I got to this part again, and I could barely finish that line because I was just like, because it was so frustrating for me to do this. In a BattleTech novel I recently just finished, Icons of War, there is a scene where one of the warriors he knows he's going to die. He's going out for the last stand, and everybody who's involved knows that's what's going to happen. And he's on the radio talking to this guy. He's telling the guy, "Look, get your people out of here. This is for us to take care of. Go. Good luck." And as I'm narrating back and forth between these two characters, it took me like 15 minutes to get it out because I keep choking up when I'm like, God. Then there are parts in this, not in chapter one, but parts in this that get the same way, where I get to the point where it's like the emotional content of the thing just starts really messing with me, and I'm like, I would be useless on stage doing this thing if I can't edit this out. Shotgun a juice pouch? What in the heck are you talking about? Oh wait, is this like a Morbius thing you guys are talking about? Because I haven't seen it, and I'm not going to. Let's focus on Grayshade. It was true, and weighing everything together, I wouldn't have lasted long drinking myself into oblivion every night. But that didn't make it any easier to dismiss my worries. With a sigh, I turned back to the task at hand. It had been a while since I'd been near Shenza's home, but it looked much as I remembered it. 4 ornate wooden columns supported a roof which extended from the second floor over the ground below, while 2 rows of 4 windows each window lit with its own lantern, outlined the 2 floors of the house. 2 guards stood watch outside the door, facing in opposite directions. 4 columns, 2 rows, 4 windows, 2 guards, typically symmetrical of a Shenza who had founded his reputation on care and precise calculation. That bit of detail was something that Grayshade would know. The reader wouldn't know it, unless Grayshade communicated it to them, which of course he did. Obviously, you just heard it. But it gives insight into the kind of person, the meticulousness of a Shenza and what kind of person he probably is, because we know he's a money trader. I think we know he's a money trader by this point. It might be in the next sentence. But it's the sort of thing that you're just like, okay, because I can get very anal about things like that. I want everything in its place. what's the French phrasing? Mise en place. You know, a place for everything and everything in its place. Um, and I'm very much the same way in a lot of things. It's like when I use a dish towel to dry my hands, and I put the dish towel back on the oven door exactly the way I found it, because that's how it's supposed to go. That's where it's supposed to be. You know, it's like when uh, when I worked at I think it was at EA. I was working in Electronic Arts, and I would wipe down the kitchen area when I was in there. When I would get finished, I was like, people are leaving, you know, bagel crumbs and bits of coffee rings all over the and so I'm there waiting for my thing to finish microwaving, so I just go ahead and wipe down the counters while I'm there. And then when I'm finishing, I'm wringing out, you know, the water and everything out of the sponge to put it back on the side of the sink, because if people leave a sopping wet sponge on the edge of the sink, it drives me crazy. You know, it's just like, no. And I have to ring it. And this guy came over. He's like, why do you do that? And I'm like, because it's gross. If you, he's like, oh, I'm not talking about the water. You're wringing all of the soap out. There's still plenty of soap in the sponge. You're wasting it by wringing it out so thoroughly. And I'm like, that's a good point. Because what I would do is, if the sponge was still soapy, I would rinse it and rinse it and rinse it and rinse it and rinse it until it was, the water was coming out clean. Then I would squeeze the last of the water out and put it down. If the soap was still in there and I just squeezed it dry, not dry, but squeezed it and then put it down, it would still be soap in the sponge for the next person to come along and moisten it, and then they could keep. I'm like, yes, you're right. I'll stop doing that. And what does it have to do with anything? What we're here to talk about the stream for? Tren? Nothing. Shut up. I'm gonna do a thing. Continuing.
Ashenza was not a merchant, but an accountant.
There, see? Told you. Accountant.
A money tracer.
That's what I said.
Of sorts. One whose skill of following trails of currency had garnered him favor with Corel's rulers, and some negative attention from those whose intentionally labyrinthine schemes he had managed to unwind.
Wait.
And some negative attention from those whose intentional...
I thought for a moment that I had said negative intention from those whose intention, but I did say attention. This is why when I finish recording an audiobook, I do a quality control pass. I go back, I have the document open on one monitor, I have the Adobe Audition open on the other, and I listen to and I read along with everything. And I make sure that I've got the stuff right, because sometimes I will misspeak and I won't notice until it's already, already up on Audible. And then there's nothing I could do about it. I mean, I could probably update the file and send it to John. He could upload, blah. Moving on.
Labyrinthine schemes he had managed to unwind. His elevation to the governor's circle had helped both the governor to assert his authority over merchants in his city, and Ashenza to protect himself and his family from the ire his talents raised. But all that happened some years ago, and I hadn't heard much about Ashenza for some time.
Oh my God, Zane Taylor, hi.
Lady Varencia Ashenza was probably better known than her husband, because if he avoided attention wherever possible, she sought it like a bee seeks the flower. No party was truly an occasion without her presence, and hosts often found themselves abandoned in favor of the raven-haired beauty who, moving from this small group of nobles to that gathering of merchants and city officials, seemed to make every move in hope of attracting more interest.
First time I started recording this, or when I read it, I was like, why do we, part of me was like, why do we care? Not in a, why did you write this? Because really good writers don't write unnecessary stuff. If it's written there, it's there for a reason. So by this point, I'm like, why are we getting this much information about his wife? I don't get it. Are we here for Ashenza? Or are we here for his wife?
Years ago, there had been rumors of an affair between Lady Ashenza and a high priest of one of the local religious sanctuaries, but the whisperings were quickly quashed and nothing was ever proven.
Of course not.
Nothing in her behavior since indicated any change of character, and what her husband thought about the whole business was anyone's guess.
Well, not anyone's guess. There are probably a bunch of people who didn't care. When you're editing things like this, you can see right where I stopped it, there's this big gap right in here. Big old gap in here. That is, I think the chat is covering the part of the scene down here. That is almost a full, actually a little bit more than a full second worth of gap there.
Yes. Still.
Now, when I'm narrating, I'm not thinking about that. When I'm editing, I start out, see, where are we? We're at about 6 minutes and 30 seconds. I come back to when I capture the noise print, and I do my noise cancellation for the whole file. Then I come back here to the beginning, and I zoom in until I get down to where things are in half-second segments. And what I do is I grab a half second of silence. It's not actual silence. It's just adjusted silence. It's where all the noise has been removed. But if you were to take this section that I have selected and put it in the middle of like 2 seconds of generated silence, because it's one of the things that you can do with a lot of DAWs or digital audio workstations, is you can insert silence, and that is true silence where there's no sound whatsoever. If you were to paste this in the middle, you would hear nothing, and then you would hear something, and then nothing. And it's like somebody, like if you're out under a starry sky, like the moon is not out, but it's still dark, but there's starlight, and there's like a snowy field or something, and somebody is dressed in black moving through that field, even if it's not snowy, but it's like a deserty kind of thing. If someone is wearing black as they're moving through there, they're still going to stand out because they are darker than the area around them. That's why you don't usually wear black. You wear like a really dark gray because it tends to blend in with the surroundings a lot more. Same sort of thing with this. When you've done the noise correction, I grab this adjusted silence, and I use that half second because using things in half second blocks allows me to put a half second between anything that I might need. It's a very natural pause, in breaks in sentences at a half second. If I need more, I can paste in another half second, so I have a full second, and if that's too much, I slowly shave off increments of time until it gets to the proper length of time so that the pause sounds natural. Let's get back to what was it, 6.5 minutes? Nope, that's 8.5 minutes. That's too far. Right, this big break right here.
Anyone's guess. Still.
That feels like it might be a little bit too long, but I'm willing to bet. No, I'm willing to bet that if I make it just a half a second, it's going to be too short. And I don't think I actually copied the half second into the buffer when I did that. So, to go back to the beginning again, grab a half second of silence, which sounds like this. Control C to finally copy the damn thing. And we come out to, where are you? Oh, that's 5.5 minutes. There's 6. Where's the 6.5 minute mark? There it is.
Anyone's guess. Still.
That is so close. It is so close to just the right amount of pause. So if I change this to half a second, paste a half second in there, it's going to be too short.
Whole business was anyone's guess. Still. Watch.
See, that is also really close, but it's just a little bit too short. And so what I would do is paste another half second in and then take off about that much.
Business was anyone's guess. Still.
There. That puts a nice separation so that they are distinct thoughts from each other, where he's finishing this thought. It is now set aside, and now we're picking up with the next piece.
Watching the motionless guards, I put my hand within my cloak and drew forth a small cylindrical case made of wood. I carefully undid the rubber stopper and pulled out the single rolled piece of vellum within. Unrolling the paper, I read, for probably the 50th time, the 2 words written on its surface. Lady Ashenza.
Dun dun dun! So, yeah. Lady Shins is who we're here for. Not we're here for. I mean, he's here for whatever. We're with him, sort of. Kind of like the never-ending story. Um, but, this was a moment that I was like, wait a minute. This is why we're talking so much about, why would he be here for her? Why would he be here to kill her? I don't understand. Is it because of the supposed affair? I mean, if that was quashed and nobody cared anymore, why has it now become a thing? Ooh. Yeah. So, craziness. Absolute and total craziness. It totally confuses and boggles the mind. So, a needle pulling thread. Yeah, the affair isn't in the current book. That's right. So that's a little bit of insight into how I do, or how I come about figuring out how I want to portray different characters. And we were going to kind of split this stream into two parts, talking about the process by which I figure out how am I going to do all this stuff. And then we're going to show me recording some stuff and actually how it works, the process. Since I already have an open file, see, I was planning ahead, I can easily do that. I can use this to record whatever it is I need to record. Now, while I am doing this, I may or may not, I'm not sure yet, have chat up, so I might not be able to see it. But I'll be reading, so, who knows what I'll be able to see and what I mean, I'll be able to see the text that I'm reading, but I may not be able to see what you guys are saying. We'll find out. So I have open here, let me grab the camera. Don't throw up. Okay, it's like if you guys are in VR, this would be weird in VR. Move the camera over here. So, what you guys have been able to see so far is over there is Adobe Audition, and over here on this monitor is Grayshade. And there you guys are. There you are. It's right there. You're right there. Probably not even looking right at it. Whatever. Put you guys back up on top of the monitor. So excited to see me record. Oh, God, no. So I'll be reading from this, but you'll be seeing what's being recorded over there. Now, if I make a mistake at any point in the thing, you will see a vertical line appear, and I'll show you what it looks like. That is not the right application. Let's have Adobe Audition selected. So while I'm recording, if at any point I wind up making a mistake, the thing that, you'll see a little green line appear, like that. This vertical, it's much easier to see. It's actually not green, it's white. But this line right here is a marker cue, and that's what I use to denote when I've made a mistake. So when I go back and I open a file up, I will see hopefully a few, not many, not 200 like I've seen in some other things that I've worked with, where it was like tongue twisters constantly, and it was just, I kept fumbling over, bits of dialogue, and it was just like 200 vertical lines in this. It was awful. But so we'll delete that, and we'll try something. This is from page 8 of the current version of the story. This is where Grayshade has been basically sitting on the roof of the house across the street. And he's got his cloak wrapped around him and the hood pulled up, so it's basically his eyes are the only thing that's, showing. And he's just been watching the house, watching the patterns of people moving so that he will know, when they come home, when they go, when they leave, when they go to bed, whatever. And so this next part, starting on page 8, is kind of him thinking about sort of how he got to the point where he is in his career. So this is what I'm going to take my headphones off because I'm not going to be hearing anything, so whatever.
I don't know why I had them on because I had to hear that. So, but I'm recording now. So, here we go. Turn off my fan too. Now you see how the fuzziness on the line is gone. It's a nice, clean, that is room tone. So, anyway, marker cue. And if you hear, okay, I swear I will start this. So if you occasionally hear like motorcycles or firecrackers, because apparently the state isn't on fire enough and people are still going through whatever firecrackers they still have left. So motorcycles and cars going by and whatnot. That's why I record at night, so that most of that stuff, except maybe the firecrackers, are usually done. All right, moving on. Marker cue. Every acolyte knows that successfully eliminating a target has very little to do with the actual killing strike. The real work is done in the hours and days, sometimes weeks, beforehand, during which each part of the target's location is scrutinized for both strength and weakness. That's a point where I could have inhaled, but it would have been too severe. So don't do that. Just take a moment and take a nice, slow, deep breath. Put a marker cue. You can edit the gap out later on. Guard movements and shift changes are mentally charted. Details of the building are committed to memory, from the placement of doors and windows to the layout of the roof, nearby sewer drains, any and all possible obstacles and hazards. And, of course, the target themselves is monitored. Patterns of going, coming, all must be carefully documented. Now, this is a different character. This is Father Esper speaking. I was about to jump into Chaosthenes' voice, and then I realized it's not Chaosthenes speaking. So this is Father Esper, who was, spoilers, he's dead, who was the head of the order that Grayshade belongs to. And he is the guy that brought Grayshade into the order. And so he has and he was going to train him, or he was training him. So I need to have his voice very different from Chaosthenes, because Father Esper does not sound like this. When I first did this, and I'm still recording, I should probably pause. When I first recorded this the first time around, I made I made Father Esper way too old for Art's liking. He's like, he's not quite that old. You know, it's just not, because I had him sounding like this. He doesn't. He's like, nope, he's not that old. Bring it back a bit. I'm like, okay, fine. Not assuming direct control, just borrowing it temporarily or something. Anyway, Father Esper's voice. And I haven't listened to the old recordings for a while, so I may not have his voice exactly right, but we'll see. Enough happens in a mission that you can't control, Father Esper used to say. Control as much as you can before the mission even begins. It was good advice, as far as it went, but it also required me to plan, and I had been given precious little of it here. Did I say that right? I don't remember if I did. I don't think I had the word time in there, so I'm going to re-record that line. But it also required me... I didn't say it. But it also required time to plan, and I had been given precious little of it here. It was partly that which bothered me. I only had until the night moon to complete my mission, which was little more than 2 days from the time I'd received my instructions, and though the mission itself would not take much time to complete, the window to prepare for it was barely adequate. I could have tracked her down on one of her trips, but they were always made to different places, and the guard contingents that always accompanied her would have made things more complicated and public than the service would have wanted. That meant it had to be done at her home, for better or worse. Such was my information at the time. No, that's not right. Such was my information as the time of the night moon approached, and as I wasn't and I wasn't happy as I looked down at the Ashenza's home from my new vantage point, the roof of the building opposite. The street here was not particularly wide, and the building, I don't have my mouse over in the wrong point, and the building in front of which I had stood for some time was owned by a jeweler, and not for long, it seemed, or he might have taken more precautions to secure it. As it was, I had little trouble scaling the side of the building to its top, where a gently sloping roof made of ash tile offered a comfortable place to collect data about Ashenza's patterns and, blessedly, to take a few hours of rest. Acolytes are trained very early to function efficiently on days without to function efficiently for days without food, water, or sleep, but we are still human, and I had not slept for 3 days. I would only be awakened when the chick-chack, Chaosthenes annoyingly, thus intentionally, don't actually whisper that. I mean, if it's like hang on, pause that recording. Because what we're dealing with is kind of his internal thoughts already, but these are the internal thoughts because they're parenthetical. So it's just a side note in his own mind to the side notes that he's noting with notes. I have some tea because I'm thirsty. A lot of people don't drink tea when they narrate because the caffeine will kind of dry out your self or whatever, or it'll make you jittery. I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me. So this can be a difficult thing to figure out how to do because you're already communicating the internal thoughts of a sort of the character. So to then go to like a nested level of internal thoughts, it can be how do you make this parenthetical part, thus intentionally, distinct from the sentence around it? Do you just pause and just let it go? In this case, yes, that's what I do. I don't actually do a stage whisper or anything like that. This isn't Dune. The like 1980 something version of Dune where like whenever anybody's thinking to themselves, they're whispering. That bugged me when I first started watching it because I didn't really realize what was going on. But later I was like, no, actually that makes sense. It makes sense why Paul is like a hunter seeker. Yeah, of course that's what. Anyway, so the sentence would go like this. Acolytes are trained very early to function efficiently for days without food, water, or sleep, but we are still human, and I had not slept for 3 days. I would only be awakened when the chick-chack. Of course, I went for the wrong sentence first. I could have just come back to the beginning of this sentence, but I forgot that it was there because we are still human. I would only be awakened when the chick-chack, Chaosthenes annoyingly, thus intentionally, childish name for his warning device, went off tinnily but quietly next to my left ear. Its mate, a flat-colored stone the same gray as the street, lay in an out-of-the-way crack near the Ashenza's front door. Anyone passing within 5 feet of it would cause it and its double to vibrate silently. Attach a few small pieces of metal to one of the chick-chacks, and a highly effective alarm, for light sleepers, as all acolytes are trained to be, was the result. Thanks to the chick-chack, I had been awakened for every shift change and passage in and out of the Ashenza's home. So, I'm going to stop recording there. Now we've got what looks like almost 7 minutes. Now, a big chunk of that is me talking to you guys because I forgot to pause. But now, if you look, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. If you look at the very beginning, I'm pointing at it like you can see where I'm pointing, whatever. On the far left side, you can see how thick the line is, I think because of the sound of the fan.
But as you move forward and you get to like, because this part is, I mean, there's that click in the middle of the thing. But when you come to here, that line is very, very thin, which is where I turned it off. So we're going to zoom in here all the way to the beginning. This is that click. Delete that. So you can see here how the line is much, much thicker than here. So this whole section up here is useless for recording room tone, and I'll show you why. When you're recording room noise or room tone, depending upon who you're talking to about it, we come in. Actually, I don't know if you're going to be able to see the sub window. Let me move the. Nope, you can't. Okay, that's great. So it's awesome. Everything I'm trying to show you, you can't see. Okay, I'm going to move the camera again. No throwing up. All right, so here we have this. I should probably move this so I can actually see what we're looking at. Okay, there, now I can see it. So there is this window here in the middle, which is noise reduction. And if we click on noise print, you see these three lines. You've got a big fuzzy red line and a fuzzy green line and a fuzzy yellow line on top. Now you can see where the fuzzy yellow line, and there's like a blue horizontal line that goes across. That is your noise floor. And anything that comes up above that line is going to be noise that's going to get into the recording. So you could grab this white, it's probably very hard to see, but there's a white square, very much like this white square over here. You could raise it up to the point where it was higher up on the thing so that, and again, I'm looking now over where the camera was, but the camera's in my hand, so you can't see that I'm looking at you. Whatever. So because of all this, the fan noise, it's a terrible, terrible thing to try to use for generating room tones. So let's select all of this and get rid of it. And what we'll do is we will take this, that's 4 seconds of, oh, it's way over here. It's 4 seconds of what is basically room noise, and I need my hand back, so hang on. There. Now we've got the noise window up again, and we're going to capture a new noise print based on this new selection. And you can see that the lines drop way down below the blue line, which means that anything that comes above that line, you're not going to be able to hear, and it's not. And my hand is cramping. My hand is cramping. So if I then, oh, way too high. Okay. Hi again. If I then apply this to the entire file, and I say, okay, apply. It does its thing where it's, for some reason, this sub window, it's, okay, whatever. And so now, if I hit play, we should hear virtually nothing. Now you see how the fuzziness on the line is gone. Yeah, of course the fuzziness on the line is gone, Trent. You've just removed it all. Anyway. And if you hear, okay. Oops. It can be kind of hellish if you accidentally grab a small part of the thing and hit play. However, that can actually be pretty useful because there'll be parts where there's like a click in the middle of something, or maybe I bumped into the microphone, or I was too close and the bill of my baseball cap hit the thing, or I moved my foot and tapped the foot of the microphone stand, and I had to drill way down into the thing to figure out where that click or that pop or that bump is and try to remove it without damaging the rest of the stuff around it. It can be a bit of a bitch to find, but it can also be hysterical, especially when you've almost got it, but you have to sit there and listen to yourself like that for like 10 seconds, trying to spot exactly where the bump on the line is. Anyway, every acolyte knows that. Here's where we started. Okay, So we take this, we select everything to the beginning of the file. All that stuff is just me talking to you guys. We already have a half second of silence of adjusted room tone in the buffer. So all we have to do is hit Control V to paste it in. And all that's now gone. Hello, Arv.
Every acolyte knows that successfully eliminating a target has very little to do with the actual killing strike. The real work is done in the hours and days, sometimes weeks, beforehand, during which each part of the target's location is scrutinized for both strength and weakness. That's a point where I could have inhaled, but it would have been too severe. So don't do that. Just take a moment and take a nice, slow, deep breath. Put a marker cue. You can exit. You can edit the gap out later on. I think I'll do that now.
So
guard movements.
Okay. So that's where we need to get to. And so we take a half second, the half second we have in the buffer, and we paste it right there. And this becomes
for both strength and weakness. Guard movements and shift changes are mentally charted. Details of the building are committed to memory, from the placement of doors and windows to the layout of the roof, nearby sewer drains, any and all possible obstacles and hazards.
Okay. Now, listening to it, I think that particular breath was too egregious. This one right here. No, not that.
Sewer drains,
that one. So what I want to do is I'm going to paste in that half second of silence. But that's too long. It's going to break the sentence up now. It's going to sound weird.
Nearby sewer drains, any and all.
It's just a little bit too long. So what you do is you shave down the pause between those two words until it's a more comfortable pause. I'm going to take out about that much.
Drains, any and all possible obstacles.
Maybe a little bit more.
Roof, nearby sewer drains, any and all possible obstacles and hazards. And, of course, the target themselves is monitored. Patterns of going, coming, all must be carefully documented. Now, this is a different character. This is Father Esper speaking. I was about to jump into Chaosthenes' voice, and then I realized it's not Chaosthenes speaking. This is Father Esper, who spoilers, he's dead. So we know that I'm probably going to go back to here. Enough happens.
Right.
Documented.
So we're going to cut all that out. Because it's too much. Just too much.
All must be carefully documented. Enough happens in a mission that you can't control, Father Esper used to say. Control as much as you can before the mission even begins.
This is another point where I get kind of become a bit of a stickler about timing because when you've got something like, a character says something, then it drops back to the narrative voice saying so-and-so said, and then it resumes what the character was saying.
Mission that you can't control, Father Esper used to say. Control as much as...
For me, there is a very exacting amount of pause that needs to be between those two to make it sound right. That does not sound right yet. So I'm going to take this and shorten it to about there, and I'm going to shorten this to about there, I figure.
A mission that you can't control, Father Esper used to say. Control as much as you can before the mission even begins.
That sounds comfortable. And, people are like, how the hell do you know how long it needs to be? Because I didn't measure anything out. I just grabbed a chunk and said, okay, do that. And it's just something you learn. You figure it out. It's like there are times where, and this was something else I wanted to make a point of saying, is that, crap, I just lost it. That's not what I was going to say, but I did just lose the thing that I was going to say. Damn it. And it was an important piece. I've been thinking about it for 2 days that I need to make sure that I mention this. And now I can't remember what it was. Now I'm going to be fixated on trying to remember this thing. And it's getting really hot in my room again, so I'm going to turn my fan back on. It had something to do with the pauses and the thing, and I'm losing it even more. You know how when you forget something, and you can almost remember what it is, and then it gets worse, and you forget more. Now you've forgotten the link to. You haven't just forgotten the thing. You've forgotten the thing that led you to the thing that you wanted to. And so now that's gone, and it's just drifting away. That's where I'm at right now. Yep. Great stream, Tren. Thanks very much. It's right. Yeah. Lots of brain issues. Mission even begins. It'll come back to me. Don't worry about it. Mission even begins. It was good advice. Now there was a. It was right there. There's a click in that. There's a bubble in my spit that pops right before I start talking again, and it is right there. You might be able to see it on the thing, but if I play it, you can definitely hear it. So that's the sort of thing that you need to listen for. Now there are, like I said, there are modules and add-ons and plugins and whatever terminology you want to use that goes through and figures out what these things, it finds them and removes them for you. Excuse me. Okay, I will pretend that I understand what that means. Or no, thank you. I mean, you've gone way beyond my mechanical engineering levels. You hit math. Oh, 20 millimeter. All right, I don't know what I thought that was. Might have thought it was micrometer, but then why wouldn't you use the symbol for micro? Never mind. So got this selected and paste in my half-second of silence. And before the mission even begins, it was good advice. And that's just the right amount of pause between those two statements, as far as it went. But it also required me to plan. And I had been given precious little of it here. Right. That's where I said, did I put the word time in there? The word time is supposed to be in there. No, not that. But it also required me to plan. It also required time to plan, is the line, if you guys remember from when I was recording it. So we look forward. Time in there. So I'm going to re-record that line. But it also required time to plan. Okay. Required me to plan. Nope. Went. Okay, so we want to go from here, roughly, to about here. And you zoom in, and you grab it, and you bring it right to the edge of the word. Because this breath ends right there, and in the word, because there's a tiny bit of a pause between the point where the breathing in stops and the breathing out starts. And so that if you cut it too tightly, it goes from the inhale to immediately speaking, and it just sounds odd. And so on this side, we zoom back in over here, and we bring it right to the edge of the word, which happens to be right there on a line break, or time break line, and we paste in a half second. We paste in a half second, there's going to be a big gap there. So instead, we just hit the delete key. All that stuff is gone, and it should stitch together perfectly as far as it went. But it also required time to plan. There, now it's okay. Required time to plan, and I had been given precious little of it here. It was partly that. So we make another half second. It's a little of it here. It was part. That's too short. Precious little of it here. It was partly that which bothered me. Okay. Now, one thing that a lot of people fail to do, Arv does this as well, though he does it usually in games, and it frustrates the living hell out of him. And it's something that everyone who's doing anything that they're working on that is important to them should learn to do. Save. So just save the thing. Of course, it gives me the pop-up window and blah. That's the wrong folder. I don't want to save it. You guys can't see the folder window because it's a pop-up window that it decided it's not going to share. Go to the, where is it? Audiobooks, thing. Grayshade, Kickstarter. We'll put it right there. We'll call it Untitled. Sure. Okay, there. It is saved. Now, if for whatever reason suddenly everything dies, we're okay. Well, if everything dies, well, I guess we'd still be okay because we're not going to care at that point. Right. Anyway, and I almost remembered what it was that I was going to comment on. It had something to do with being able to tell that it's something you learn. Being able to tell where to, how much to grab a hold of and delete without actually looking at it. Somebody had once asked me when I was doing, I think it was Beyond Skyrim stuff, when I was recording that like 1,500 years ago. I was trying to cut into the middle of two lines. There was basically a part at the end of this take that I didn't like, and I was trying to cut the beginning out of the next take, so it was just the beginning of this one and the end of this one that I wanted to stitch together. And all I didn't listen to them. I just grabbed from here, slid over to there, and they were like, how did you know that's where it was? You learn to recognize the waveforms of it's like you can just see the pattern in the waveform. You can see where this one is clearly saying something, and this one over here is saying the same thing because the waveforms match up. And so you can highlight those things and usually snip out what you want to. It takes practice, though, which bothered me. I only had until the night moon to complete my mission, which was little more than More clicking. Yay! But that's a small enough segment that it might be okay without having to add any silence back in. Complete my mission, which was little more than 2 days from the time I'd received my instructions. And though the mission itself would not take much time to complete, the window to prepare for it was barely adequate. I could have tracked her down on one of her trips, but they were always made to different places, and the guard contingents that always accompanied her would have made things more complicated and public than the service would have wanted. That meant it... Oh, there's another one right there. Bye. Would have wanted. That meant it had to be done at her home. I had also mentioned the plugins and whatnot that people use to remove sibilants or clicks or breath. The problem with those is, I mean, some of them you can train so that they know what to look for. What is a click that you want versus a click that you don't. But that takes a lot of work to train them to do it right. In my opinion, it's faster to just don't let automation take care of it for you. Go through and hand edit your narrations. It's just generally better, because what if there is a scene, like I mentioned earlier, maybe somebody is cold, they're like in a freezing thing, and the text specifically mentions that their teeth are chattering. Me, as a performer, I would want to include that teeth chattering in their dialogue so that you could hear them shivering when they were doing it, and their teeth clattering together. That is part of the scene. It is part of the noises that they are making. And it's important to me, it is important to convey the performance the way that it should be done. But something like a declicker isn't going to know that. And so they're going to spot these clicks, and they're going to be like, nope, that needs to go. No, don't do that. I want those in there. I hate them. I hate to just... I mean, automation can be kind of cool, but automation isn't going to know which clicks you're going to want and which clicks you aren't. So just do it by hand. And yes, plosives are, they can be bad. Which is why, usually, when I record, I am, because like right now, I'm on axis. I'm facing directly towards the microphone. Now, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it or not. We'll see. I'm going to bring you around the monitor the other direction. So this is my microphone. It's very dusty in there because I never dust my microphone, which sounds euphemistic, but it's not. So this is the pop guard, which prevents like plosives. That's when your breath comes out and hits the microphone, and you get, like, if you're like Peter Piper picked a peck of pipple? Yeah, of Pitbull peppers. I'm sure Pitbull peppers are snuggle monsters and wonderful, but you can hear when the breath hits the microphone. Now, I have my pop guard in here, but, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a point where right in the middle, it's sort of sticking out a little bit. And that's because the pop guard is up against the microphone, because this mic is too long for the shock mount that it is installed in. So the microphone is pushing, get in there, get in there, is pushing up against the backside of the pop filter. So it's like, it doesn't really do much good. And so what I have to do is, and a lot of people do this, you can stay close, but you turn off axis. So you're still right next to the microphone, but you're facing across it rather than directly at it. And any plosives go that way rather than directly at the thing. There is a documentary about voice actors. I think it was done by DiMaggio, I think was the one who did it. And there's a scene where he's talking about plosives. And one of the things that he does when he's at the thing, he will put either his finger or a pencil or something up against his lips so that it'll split the plosive, and the air will go to either side of the microphone rather than hitting the microphone like that. I'm like, that's really cool. So, right, what was I talking about? Oh, that's probably what that was. is a pop in the thing. Moving on. Had to be done at her home for better. That is also a pop. Stupid spit bubbles. Be done at her home for better or worse. Such was my information at the time. No, that's not right. Such was my information as the time of the night moon approached, and as I wasn't So such was my right. Such was my information. Let's take it. Nope, that's too much. Take that out. For better or worse. Such was my information as the time of the night moon approached, and I wasn't happy. Remove that. Moon approached, and I wasn't happy as I looked down at the. That's what it was. That was the thing that I forgot. Okay, so sorry, it just suddenly occurred to me. When you're doing voice acting, like for animation or video games or whatever, directors will often tell you, give me 3 takes. Give me like ABC or low, middle, high or whatever. Like they want 3 variations on the line. If you're doing narration, you don't necessarily want that. You want your lines, like if you make a mistake and you come back to take another stab at it, you need to enunciate exactly the way that you did before. You need to match the tone, the inflection, everything has got to be the same when you come back through. Otherwise, it's going to sound like when somebody, what we often on Arv's channel, which we are on Arv's channel, whatever, we mentioned the movie Sneakers with Robert Redford and Dan Aykroyd and everybody. And there's the scene, which pisses me off, where they're trying to get the sexy lady to get the geeky guy to say all the words for his voice print to get access to his stuff. And when they play it back, because the tech was much more primitive back then, all they have to do is have the words in the right sequence, and he's like, my voice is my passport, kind of thing. And it does not sound natural at all. And that's a much more extreme version of it, which would not play now because voice and speech recognition are both much more advanced than they were before. But, if you've got a video game that you're doing stuff for and your line is, don't touch that, it's bad for you. They're going to want, don't touch that, it's bad for you. And then, don't touch that, it's bad for you. Or, don't touch that, it's bad for you. Variations on a theme. With narration, not really. I mean, you might realize, no, that doesn't sound right, I need to say it differently, but then you need to change the whole thing. If you're trying to cut something in the middle of a line and you change it up like that, it's going to sound weird as hell. So be very careful and tone match yourself when you're going through. Moving on. Nope, don't. Yeah. Look down at the Achenza's home from my new vantage point. The roof. Ooh. There, yeah, that was a click fest right there.
Vantage point.
Let's get in there. The other thing is, we've got a bunch of clicks in here. Okay, a lot of them. There's 4 in there that I can see. The problem is, one of those is it's the T at the end of the word point. You don't want to remove that because then it becomes my vantage point. And it sounds weird. But which of those is the T? Sometimes this becomes, you just have to experiment. And I think, personally, that this one here, I think that's the T. I'm not sure, but I think it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one out. And you have to be careful when you're, cutting things out and pasting the 2 ends together. If you come in, and let's find a better example. Let's look in here. Let's say, for example, you tried to cut this out. You can see how this part here is above the red line. If you're going to do one of these splices, you need to make your cuts where the audio crosses that red line, where it crosses the 0 line. Because otherwise, you will get this kind of because it's literally cutting in the middle of your vocalization to something else. So you want to find areas where it's on the line, and that's where you cut. So let's see. This one, I'm going to cut from here to here. You don't want to cut here where it's way down below the line. You could cut there. It's kind of close, but try to get it as close to on the line as you can. I'm going to cut that one out, and we'll see what that sounds like.
A new vantage point.
Nope. Well, I mean, the sound of the T is still there, so I didn't cut the T out, so that's fine. So now I'm going to go cut the other one out, one of the other ones. Cut that one. Should be all right. Yes. Let's see how this one sounds.
New vantage point.
Yes. So there's one more. This could be a click, or this could be I think that's the click, and I think this is the T. So I'm going to take this out. Nope, that's above the line, I think. Just barely, but it should be okay.
New vantage point.
There's one more. And I think it's the one that I thought was this one here.
Home from my new vantage point.
No, it's still in there. Damn it.
New vantage point.
But it's minor enough. I have now reached a point where I don't care.
New vantage point. The roof of the building opposite. The street here was not, and the building.
And paste that here.
Building opposite. The street here was not particularly wide, and the building. I don't have my mouse over the wrong point. And the building. Not particularly wide, and the building in front of which I had stood for some time was owned by a jeweler, and not for long, it seemed, or he might have taken more precaution to secure, or he might have,
Your cuts are not always going to be on one of these vertical lines, which are the demarcations of like increments of time. They're not always going to be there, but when you get close to them, at least with Audition, it tends to snap to one of those lines. So sometimes you have to zoom way in to be able to get the kind of refined control that you want. Also, before I forget, you can see over here on the left side where you've got all these markers. These are all the markers for all of the stuff that we've recorded. Now, if I zoom out to look at the whole file, you'll see all those vertical lines. Those are all the mistakes that I made. Those are areas where I have to go in and fix something. Now, I didn't used to do that. I didn't used to know that I could do that. I didn't know that there was a marker cue button for the thing. Some people will have like a dog training clicker, kind of thing. Some people literally just click their tongue. If they make a mistake, they'll just, and it'll show up as a big, spike on the thing, and they will know that that's what I'm looking for. It doesn't always work for me. Sometimes it's still pretty quiet. So I personally, I use the thing, and this may just be, I don't know if, what do you call that thing? Pro Tools does that. I'm sure it does have, marker cues that you can put in, but I don't know how to do it because I don't use Pro Tools. And I don't know if Audacity can do it because it's been years since I've used Audacity. And I suspect that Reaper probably can, but again, I've never used Reaper, so figure it out on your own. All right, moving back in. For long, it seemed, or he might have taken more precautions to secure it. As it was, I had little trouble scaling the... Okay. I got to be careful here because you can see that the left side of my selection is right up against that little blob where the breath is. So I don't want to cut too close to that. Let's bring this back to about there. And then this we can bring much closer to here. Oh, another thing. Down here under the window, you'll see these controls down here. And on the far right side one is this thing, which is skip selection. So in other words, what will happen if I push play right now, it'll start, depending upon where I put the start line. Let's say I put it over here. It will play up to the beginning of the part that I selected, and then it will instantly jump to the end and play what comes after. So it'll look like this, or sound like this. I had little trouble. No. I mean, I do have to actually select the skip intro, or skip selection thing. There. Now it's green. Now it's active. Here's what it does. I had little trouble. Right. So that sounds fine. As it was, I had little trouble scaling the side of the building to its top, where a gently sloping roof made of ash tile offered a comfortable place to collect data. Ash tile offered a comfortable place. So, what I want to do here is, because this starts, kind of in the middle of the sentence. So I don't want to go back and re-record all of this. Where a gently sloping roof. But what I'm going to do is find a hard consonant, like a C or a T or a P or a D. Something, in this case, the C at the beginning of comfort, because that is a place where the sound will have stopped, and you can usually cut in real tight on something like that. Tile offered a comfortable, right there. It is that line, comfortable. And I'm going to come over here, and this should be comfortable. And it should sound like this. Tile offered a comfortable place. 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 Tile offered a comfortable. You can hear how comfortable is more stressed in the second take than it was in the first. Tile offered a comfortable place. Offered a comfortable. That's what I was talking about when I was saying that you need to be consistent with your enunciations and your inflections and everything, and your accentuations. This, to me, it's not very bad, but to me, it sticks out. And so what I'm going to do instead of cutting in on the beginning of comfortable, I'm going to find another spot where it's not going to be as obvious. Place to collect a comfortable place. I could actually cut in on the word place, I think. Offered a comfortable place to collect. Offered a comfortable place to. That sounds better. This means that I have to manually remove this marker, but that's fine. I can do that. Select the marker, hit the little garbage can. It's gone. Offered a comfortable place to collect data about it. To collect data. Okay. Data is the word where I want to splice these two together because it's a hard consonant and it sounds the same in both utterances of it. Data. Ooh, but here's a bad habit that I have. The word data actually starts here, but this little bit before it here it's a bad habit that I have, and I shouldn't do it. It's where I start my vocalization before I get, and it's especially bad with hard consonants like D's and C's and stuff. I start the utterance, I start speaking before I start the word. And so it's data. It's not data, it's data. Collect data about, here it's a little better if we do it this way, I think. Data, of data, of data, of data, of data, of data, of data. So I really should cut that out too. To collect data. I mean, I did it over here too. So, but what we can do is go to the word data right there and then cut this out. We're actually going to paste in that half second of silence, and that's way too long. To collect data about it, to collect data. So we're going to shave down this. Out there, maybe? We'll place to collect data about Ashenza's. It's close. It's real close. I would probably make that a little bit shorter. Place to collect data about Ashenza's patterns and, blessedly, to take a few hours of rest. Acolytes are trained very early to function efficiently on days without... To function efficiently for days without food, water, or sleep. Now, this is a point where hopefully I would remember, because sometimes you'll record something and you're like, instead of recording a chapter and then going and editing it and losing your momentum, and then once you finish editing it, then starting the next chapter, you'll want to record a chapter, save it, put it away. Go to the next chapter, record it, save it, put it away. Record it, save it, record it, save it, record it, save it, and you want to narrate in a continuous flow as much as you can. So you might not get to the editing for like a week, or depending on how long, because a lot of times I will record everything. I'll record the whole book, and then I will go back and I will do all the editing at once. So sometimes it's been a week or two before, since I've heard the recorder, since I've done the recording. And so what will end up happening is I will forget that here, acolytes are trained very early to... I forget that all of this is stuff that I ultimately didn't want to say, and I started the whole paragraph over here. Acolytes are trained very early. So I would wind up editing all of this, getting out all of the mistakes and all of the stuff, and then I would get to this point and then realize, oh, crap. I started the whole thing over right here. I could just delete all of this. But you get to a point where even a week later, you remember, no, wait a minute. I did something different with this. And so you'll start scanning forward, and you'll find, or scrubbing forward. When you're moving backwards and forwards through an audio file, it's referred to as scrubbing. So let's go a little further. Did I do it again? I would only be aware. No. Okay. So I'm pretty sure that this right here is the part that I want to actually start with. So all of this, and there's a little bit, see that click right at the beginning of the thing? It's probably where I was opening my mouth to speak and a bubble went. Now if I paste right now, if I hit Control V and paste, it's going to paste a half a second at the end of that big gap over there. So that's probably going to be too long for what we want, but we'll see. 2 hours of rest. Acolytes are trained. Yeah, that's too long. So let's grab the whole thing and we will paste a half second in there instead of that whole thing to take a few hours of rest. Acolytes are trained very early to function efficiently for days without food, water, or sleep, but we are still human. And I had not slept for 3 days. For 3 days. I would only be awake. And then, even though I only recorded it like half an hour ago, there's the chick-chack conversation. We know that's coming up. So, no. And I had not slept for 3 days. I would only be awakened. I went for the wrong sentence. I would only be awake. And let's copy that. For 3 days. I would only be awakened when the chick-chack, Chaosthenes annoyingly,
thus intentionally, childish name for his warning device went off tinnily but quietly next to my left ear. Its mate, okay, my left ear. Its mate, a flat-colored stone the same gray as the street, lay in an out-of-the-way crack near the Ascenza's front door. Anyone passing... Ooh. That is a weird sound. I don't know what that sound is. What is it? No. That's a gross sound. We'll get rid of that. No. Door. Anyone passing within 5 feet of it would cause passing within 5 feet of it would cause it and its double to vibrate silently. Yes, it was a ghost, exactly. Silently. Attach a few small pieces of metal to... That's too long of a break right there. Again, you just get a sense for it after a while. That, like this needs to be a little bit shorter. It's too long of a pause. Silently. Attach a few small pieces of metal to one of the chick-chacks and a highly effective alarm for light sleepers. That's too long of a break. Effective alarm for light... Still too long. Effective alarm for light sleepers, as all acolytes are trained to be, was the result. Thanks to... No. Yeah. Sorry, I was looking at this waveform and thinking that it was the same thing, that this was the start of the same sentence. Thanks to the chick-chack, that this was the start of the same sentence, but it's not. If you look at the waveforms, you can see that this and this do not match at all. But this and this kind of do. Thanks to the chick-chack, I had been awakened for every shift. The chick-chack, I had been awakened for every shift change and passage in and out of the Ascenza's home. And that actually brings us to the end of what we have recorded. There is a little bit of a click there at the end because that's where I pushed the button to stop it, and it picked up the thing. Picked up the sound of the key, which is why I want a quieter keyboard. But the keyboard that I really like, and I was like, ooh, that one looks good, they don't make it anymore. Or if they do, I have to drive all the way to frickin' San Francisco to get it. But whatever. And so this brings us to the completed, edited thing, which is now, remember, when we started, this thing was, 6.5 minutes long? It is now 3 minutes long. So half of that was either me talking to you guys or mistakes that needed to be edited out. This is the same sort of thing that winds up happening. You record something, it'll take you 30 minutes. You will wind up with a 30-minute file. And recording is the quick part. That actually goes very, very quickly. It's the editing that takes forever. And a good rule of thumb for a lot of things is if you've got a 30-minute file, well, however long it is, doesn't matter how long it is. If you've recorded something, however long that is, it's going to take 3 to potentially 8 times that length. So in this case, if you've got like a 1-hour recording, it's going to take between 3 hours and 8 hours to narrate it, or to edit the thing. A lot of times it's 3 to 5, depends on how good you are, what you're doing. When you first start out, you're going to have a lot of trouble figuring out how to do stuff. You're still learning the software, what have you. It could take potentially a lot longer. And it depends on what the complexity of the story is. Sometimes there are a lot of very complex, elven names that just don't roll off the tongue for as graceful as they should be. But sometimes, So you start out with an hour-long thing, or in this case, almost 7 minutes. I think it was 6 minutes, 49 seconds or something. And now we're down to 2 hours, 54 seconds. 2 minutes, 54 seconds. So almost 3 minutes. And that's how, things are going to go together. And you would have typically, like, at least as far as ACX or Audible are concerned, you would have like a second of silence at the beginning and like 2 or 3 seconds of silence at the end, so that there is a
distinction between where the chapters begin and end. It gives people, a few seconds to hit pause if they want to stop. Do we get to hear the final? Arv and I were talking about making this a 2-hour stream, and we are at the 2-hour mark right now. So if he doesn't mind me continuing to go, yeah, I'll play the whole thing for you guys. But it's his channel, it's his call. I don't know if he wants to do anything with thing stuff. Right, Rock God. Very likely. You said 3? Okay, then I'll absolutely continue going for another hour. Not a problem. So yes, it takes a long time to edit these things. Now, the better you get at it, the less mistakes that you'll make, and the quicker and easier the editing is. There was something else I was going to say, but again, I've lost the thread. No, it's fine. I was when I finished editing this and I pulled out and I saw how long it was. I was like, oh man, I would love to play the whole thing in one. And it's only 3 minutes, so it's not that big of a deal. But I thought we had talked about the doohickey. That was the other thing. Okay, so when you first start narrating, when you have authors who are first looking for narrators and they don't really understand what is involved in narrating, they will be like, hey, could you narrate my novel? And you're like, okay, how long is it? And they're like, it's a rather personal question, isn't it, sir? No, sorry, that's Monty Python. And they're like, it's like 356 pages. And you're like, no, what's the word count? And they're like, I don't know. It's like, well, I need to know the word count. Page count doesn't mean anything to narrators. If you were to quadruple the font size, just blow it up, huge font, it's definitely going to change the length of the book, but the story is still the same length. It's still the same number of words, no matter what you do to the size of the text and whatnot. And what we are concerned with is how many words do we have to say. So if you're going to be dealing with narrators, always have a word count for them, because that is the more important thing. And from that, we can estimate how long the finished product is probably going to be. So it's like an hour for every 10,000 words, roughly. It depends on what's going on in the story. If there's a lot of combat and stuff, at least the way I narrate, I tend to, like I said earlier, I tend to read combat much faster because it keeps it frenetic and it keeps the listener kind of on edge and everything. It makes it harder for them to keep up with the thing, and it keeps them like, a little bit of anxiety, which is good. But it also makes the audiobook go by faster. Whereas if we're talking about people being sneaky, there's a lot of stealth, things are moving very slowly, I tend to narrate much more slowly, and the book takes a little bit longer. But a good rule of thumb is generally 1 hour for every 10,000 words. So if you give me a 90,000 word document, it's going to end up being roughly a 9-hour audiobook when everything's done. And so that's a good way of trying to remember do more of the Bob Ross. Okay, so with the Bob Ross thing, let's just go ahead. We're going to save this file. Yay! And now we're going to listen to this thing. Every acolyte knows that successfully eliminating a target has very little to do with the actual killing strike. The real work is done in the hours and days, sometimes weeks, beforehand, during which each part of the target's location is scrutinized for both strength and weakness. Guard movements and shift changes are mentally charted. Details of the building are committed to memory, from the placement of doors and windows to the layout of the roof, nearby sewer drains, any and all possible obstacles and hazards. And, of course, the target themselves is monitored. Patterns of going, coming, all must be carefully documented. Enough happens in a mission that you can't control, Father Esper used to say. Control as much as you can before the mission even begins. It was good advice, as far as it went, but it also required time to plan, and I had been given precious little of it here. It was partly that which bothered me. I only had until the night moon to complete my mission, which was little more than 2 days from the time I'd received my instructions, and though the mission itself would not take much time to complete, the window to prepare for it was barely adequate. I could have tracked her down on one of her trips, but they were always made to different places, and the guard contingents that always accompanied her would have made things more complicated and public than the service would have wanted. That meant it had to be done at her home, for better or worse. Such was my information as the time of the night moon approached, and I wasn't happy as I looked down at the Ashenza's home from my new vantage point, the roof of the building opposite. The street here was not particularly wide, and the building in front of which I had stood for some time was owned by a jeweler, and not for long, it seemed, or he might have taken more precautions to secure it. As it was, I had little trouble scaling the side of the building to its top, where a gently sloping roof made of ash tile offered a comfortable place to collect data about Ashenza's patterns and, blessedly, to take a few hours of rest. Acolytes are trained very early to function efficiently for days without food, water, or sleep, but we are still human, and I had not slept for 3 days. I would only be awakened when the chick-chack, Chaosthenes' annoyingly, thus intentionally, childish name for his warning device, went off tinnily but quietly next to my left ear. Its mate, a flat-colored stone the same gray as the street, lay in an out-of-the-way crack near the Ashenza's front door. Anyone passing within 5 feet of it would cause it and its double to vibrate silently. Attach a few small pieces of metal to one of the chick-chacks, and a highly effective alarm, for light sleepers, as all acolytes are trained to be, was the result. Thanks to the chick-chack, I had been awakened for every shift change and passage in and out of the Ashenza's home. Okay, so right there at the end, I would probably go back and re-record this part. Thanks to the chick-chack, that sounds a little bit too frivolous, a little bit too, whatever. Grayshade doesn't strike me as that kind of character. So I would probably go back and re-record it to thanks to the chick-chack, which I can probably do right now. Just turn off my fan and if you're going to do something like this, where you're going to append something onto the end of a thing, make sure that you turn off this little blue loop arrow, because otherwise when it gets to the end of the file, it goes back to the beginning and starts recording over what you've already done. So since I was already at the end of the file and I turn off the loop, it jumps back to the beginning. So we go back to the end of the file. And now I don't quite remember what I sounded like. So turn the loop back on for a minute. Back to the end of the file. Thanks to the chick-chack, thanks to the chick-chack, thanks to this is how I tone match myself. Thanks to the chick-chack, 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 thanks to the chick-chack. That kind of shit drives my housemate insane. Just so we're clear, that's what happens. Okay, so turn off the loop, back to the end of the file, and we do it this way. Thanks to the chick-chack, thanks to the chick-chack, thanks to the chick-chack. That part's okay. Now, we already have, because we already did the noise cancellation, we already have the noise print in the buffer. So all I need to do is hit Control-Shift-P. It opens up a sub-window you guys can't see. And I this time don't select entire file. I just leave it on the selection that it's already on. I hit apply. It removes the existing room noise from this selection, and I pick whichever one of these I want. I'm going to shorten the time between all of them. And remove this part. Okay, so thanks to the chick-chack. So if you look at the waveform here, and then you look at the waveform here, you see how much bigger, how much farther down this spike goes than it does over here. So I was much closer to the microphone when I did this. So these are potentially much louder than the rest of this thing. And this is part of what I was talking about it being consistent with your intonation. So if I paste this one in here, it might sound very odd compared to everything else. The result. Thanks to the chick-chack, I had been awakened for every shift change. Not bad. Not bad. But I'm going to try this one.
Result. Thanks to the chick-chack, I had been awakened for every... But I'm thinking this one's probably going to be the best of them. And I want to get it closer to that breath. Result. Thanks to the chick-chack, I had been awakened for every shift change. That's better. That's better. So let's grab, zoom in until we can get to the half-second demarcations. That should be, oh, nope, that is not a half-second silence. Is that? Maybe. No, it's not. You guys probably can't hear it through the stream, but there is a tiny kind of in there. So we're going to go back to the beginning. We know this is a half-second of silence, so we're going to grab that. And we're going to... There. So now it ends like... Thanks to the chick-chack, I had been awakened for every shift change and passage in and out of the Ashen's home. Ooh, no. Mm-mm. Oh. That shouldn't be there. Change and passage in and out of the Ashen's home. That wasn't it. It's probably this little bump right here. It's probably that. In and out of the Ashen's home. It wasn't. So let's do this. I'm going to take all this and tell the thing to skip over that selection. Ashen's home. And, ooh, no, because I lose the M if I do that. Ashen's home. Ashen's home. Ashen's home. Ashen's home. Yeah. Okay, delete that. In and out of the Ashen's home. That'll do. And so we save. And I would consider this complete. This would be finished. And I would save it, which I just did. I would close it and move on to the next chapter, probably. So that's kind of all that I really had planned. I'm going to turn my fan on again because it's hot in my room. Just because I have the window closed so that, you know, cars going by and whatnot are not going to be muddling any recordings and whatnot up. So, for those of you who have been, keep hearing chick-chack, it's not a polite word. Jack Chick. Oh, Jack Chick. Yeah, I've heard of him. So we've got, I was about to point this way, but that's where the coins are. Well, I mean, pretty much everything on this bottom row are that way. But since I've got the transition thing open on OBS, Streamlabs, or Slobs, as apparently it is called, according to Ara, which makes sense. I mean, it's Streamlabs OBS, so, okay. But I keep wanting to point this way because on the stream window, the other transition window is like right there. And so I keep wanting to point right here to point to the Kickstarter because on my screen, it's right next to me right here, but it's actually way over there. So it's like, I have to point that way. It's way at the other end over there. So you guys can see where the Kickstarter is and how far it's going and whatnot. Let's see. I can see the chat. I can't see the viewer numbers. I have no idea how many people we have watching the stream. This isn't D&D. Yeah, right. I guess I don't have to do the Brady Bunch thing like I do with the squares and whatnot when we're doing D&D and whatnot. I really enjoy doing that. I really think that's a lot of fun. It doesn't get nearly the aspect of freaking people out that it used to, because when I first started doing it,
people were like, wait, are you actually in the same house? How are you looking directly at him? It's like, because I measured it out when, when a lot of time, and I did explain it in one stream. I was like, when you see me sitting here like this, and I kind of wiggle a finger, I'm watching myself on the stream to see which finger is pointing in which direction and where, so that I know where I'm pointing relative to me. And then from that, I can figure out where the other squares are, so I know who to point at for what different things. I never should have told everybody that, because then it kind of ruined the magic, I guess. But, whatever. Sorry, I was reading the thing. Yeah, it is. I really enjoy doing that because it's subtle. Not a lot of people notice it, and it allows me to kind of triangulate where the people are that I should be looking at. I don't do that so much anymore because what I do is I'm like, okay, are they on the map side or are they on the microphone side? And so I just figure out which side I need to look towards. It's the challenge is when we're doing Eberron and we're kind of stacked in that little ziggurat thing. I have to figure out if I'm pointing at Marie, is it this angle, or is it this angle, or is it this? Like, because I know John's over there. So, but how high up are the? Anyway, yeah. When you explain a magic trick, yes, that's. Oh yeah, I have a magic trick I could share with you guys. I guess it's one of my favorites. I'm sure Arv is going to love this because it's, so rude. Anyway, so there's nothing. I don't remember what the name of the stand-up comic was that I stole this from. Not like stand-up comics ever steal anything from each other. By the way, watch The Marvelous Miss Maisel. It's a great show. I've only seen season 1, but I absolutely love it. Anyway, look, it's nothing here. Nothing here. Look, it's a bird. Fuck you, it's magic. Anyway, I love that joke. It's a good joke. No, not the thumb thing. That's not a magic. Well, I mean, it is a magic trick joke, but it's more of a doctor magic trick joke. Yeah. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, good. Right. So, what are we going to talk about now? You guys must have questions about narrating. I hope, because I don't imagine that I've explained the entirety of it to the point that you are all ready to go and supplant me as, narrator for Catalyst. Put the little clap emojis in there. People ask questions right now. Yeah, one and only chance. You put yourself back in the main screen. I could. Just me. Transition. Ta-da! There you go. This is me. You may now ask your questions. Of course, now I can't see chat because I clicked off that window. But there it is. That was another magic thing. It doesn't involve a doctor. How do you know the difference between an oral and a rectal thermometer? The taste. That is not true. I mean, it is true, but it shouldn't be the answer to the thing. Oral thermometers have the old style that had the mercury in them have a blue tip on the bottom and a red tip for the rectal thermometer on the thing, which there was an episode of The X-Files where some kid was presenting, Jesus-ly qualities like stigmata and teleportation and stuff like that. And I know nobody asked this, but I haven't seen a question yet. And so Scully goes to the school and she's like taking his temperature. She's bringing the thermometer to his mouth. And I jokingly, sitting there as we're watching, I'm sitting on the couch next to my friend. And I'm like, unfortunately, that's a rectal thermometer. She lets go of the end and it's a red tip. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. No. God, I love X-Files. And they did the Ex-Cops episode where they're like, look, we're chasing a werewolf. And I'm like, show him. Show me the werewolf. And it's like, no, it's Freddie Mercury. Freddy Krueger. Wow, okay. A little bit of a difference between those two. Maybe not a lot, but a little bit of a difference between those two. Oh, please tell me this is a question. Is the fox behind you your own evil genius? No, actually. That is a piece of art that I got at the 2019. Well, it was before BlizzCon. It's the Con Before the Storm, which was a micro convention that took place right before BlizzCon, and that was in the art auction. And I had entered a raffle, and I wound up winning. And they were like, okay, you're going to get this thing, this Volpera study. And I'm like, I don't remember what that looks like. Can you show me a picture of it? And they're like, no, because then you would have the art. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Oh, you asked a question. I'm sorry. Go up a few. Was it before or after the ta-da? Oh, there it is. What character types do you like and or dislike? Arv will probably automatically know the answer to this. Mitch Gittleman definitely knows the answer to this because it was one of the first times we ever did any voiceover stuff with Arv. It was the release day of Shadowrun Hong Kong. And Arv was over in Seattle. He was live streaming from the Harebrained Schemes offices. And you've got him and Mitch Gittleman sitting there together in the offices because basically they were like, sure, you can stream it on release day, but you got to do it from here. And so Arv told them, because I'm going to have some of my friends Skype in it because we still used Skype. We still had, I think we were using Skype that day. And Arv was telling Mitch, it's like, because they're going to Skype in and we're going to do the voiceover for all the text because they only had one voice, and it was the voice of Raymond Black, who's like the main character's, adopted father. And everything else was just text. And so we were going to basically, it was like the beginnings of the Our Vocalist stuff. And so Mitch was like, oh, so this is like an audition. And I'm sitting there listening to him and I'm like, yes, it is. I'm like, oh, it's like, don't. And we were just voices. We didn't have cameras feeding in or anything. And we were going through the beginning, and Arv's doing most of the reading because it was all, the main characters stuff. We'd done character creation, class selection, all that stuff. And we get to the point where the boat pulls into the dock in Hong Kong. And Arv informs me that I'm going to be reading the part of Duncan Wu, who is an orc cop. And this is the first time I see this character. I know nothing about him. And he's like, he's an orc. And I'm like, okay. All right, no problem. I've got this. It's fine. And so Arv is reading the part where his character is getting out of the boat. And there was like a sloshy, gurgling feeling because he's feeling kind of seasick from getting on the thing. And Duncan's first line in the game is, well, don't you look like shit? And watching Mitch's face light up and just watching him kind of start adjusting his headphones, and he sort of looks off camera and smiles at somebody and nods. And I'm like, got him. Fucking got him. I'm like, yeah. That was what led to me doing the voice of Santiago Espinosa. Ultimately doing the voice of Santiago Espinosa in Battletech for Harebrained Schemes. They wanted me to do the voice of Mastiff, who is basically your kind of your mentor when you're training to be a mech warrior. And like between the time that they said, this is who we want you to voice, and the time that it was actually time to do the recording, they had found somebody else. They were like, oh, actually we want him to do the voice. I'm like, it's fine. It's cool. And at first I thought they were like, we don't need you anymore. And I was like, it's cool, because auditions come and go. There's, sometimes you get the gig, sometimes you don't. It's no big deal. But they were like, no, we want you to do the voice of the villain. I'm like, all right, I will absolutely do the voice of the villain. It was a lot of fun. And orcs are probably among my favorite characters to voice, and things that sound similar to orcs, like one of the Fire and Frost Shadowrun book that I narrated. There's a troll in there named Pineapple, who he's the scene where they meet the face for their group, and the I've forgotten her name, the one of the ladies who's part of the thing, the physical adept. Anyway, she's like, the big guy is Pineapple, and the guy looks up and he's like, for the fruit, and Pineapple's like, for the grenade, and I'm just like, oh, I love him so much. Yeah. And I had to make certain that was the part that when you go to the Audible page and there's the cover art and the sample, that you click on the sample, you get to listen to the thing. I had to make sure that was part of the retail sample that you get to hear for free, because people have to hear Pineapple say that, because it's awesome. There's a part later in the book when they're driving through the Amazon, and like one of the native guys swings in on a vine and lands and like tries to attack Pineapple, and he just like basically grabs him, and because he's a troll, he's gigantic, he's like 3 meters tall. He just grabs this little guy and just chucks him out of the thing. It's like the woman whose name I can't remember, she's like, why didn't you shoot him? You could have just shot him. He's like, no, that was ballsy. I like ballsy. And I'm like, I like ballsy too. I'm like, no, stop it. Don't do that. Don't. Right. So, other questions that people might have of things. If there were any I didn't see. I'm so happy to, do the thing. Right, and then I asked about, okay, so have we had any other questions? And demonetized. Who's your favorite character voice in Grayshade? Man, that's really tricky. And, well, it is and it isn't, because I have to choose between 3. But I like all 3 of them so much that all 3 of them are in my character demo, and that's Aesel, Kagan, and Rumor. Just that scene, God, I just love them to death. They're just great. And Kagan says, "Oh, Aesel, better back off." Is him, and Aesel is like, "Are you daft, Kagan?" And then, of course, Rumor is, I feel like he shouldn't have any teeth anymore, but he does, so whatever. I guess he does, anyway. Let's see, where are we? Okay, in Grayshade. My chat window is about this big, so I have to keep scrolling back and forth to see if I can find what everybody's talking about. Have you experimented with acoustic foam panels? Yes, these actually, wrong side. This thing right here, I'm not used to the camera being reversed on my side. These are acoustic panels, and there's a big freaking pile of them over there that I haven't put up yet. Actually, a friend of mine gave them to me as a present, like a year and a half ago, and I haven't put them up. I have several up on the walls already, but I don't have any on the ceiling. But for the most part, I generally don't need them. If I do, if I'm in a situation where there's just too much echo for something, like if I'm shouting, that will be loud enough to bounce back off the ceiling, and it'll pick it up. But if I have to do that, that is when I grab my pillow and I put it behind my head, so it becomes a completely different sound. You've got the sound without the pillow, and then you bring the pillow in, and it gobbles up all the sound that might be reflecting off the wall behind me. And of course, since it's just audio, nobody knows you're doing this shit, so it's fine. Because this map is just a vinyl poster on a bare wall. There's none of these acoustic tiles are underneath this thing, so any sound that hits it and bounces back is just direct reflection. So I have to be careful how I'm doing it. But usually I'm blocking most of the sound. Okay, so that's the thing. Do they do any good? Yes. Yes. For those people who have a walk-in closet, keep lots of clothes in there because clothes gobble up sound like crazy. You will know when your acoustic treatments are done properly because you will walk into the space and the first couple of times you do it, you will almost lose your balance. Because while we might not have echolocation developed to the level of bats, we do a lot of navigation based off the sound that's bouncing off things around us. And when you don't have that, you kind of lose what's going on, and it can make you feel a little dizzy. Okay, let's see. Looked like there was something from Prince Justin here. Mentioned before that types of scenes that cause you to read differently and edit differently. Is that also true of genre? Did I read that correctly? Yes. Yes, it can be true. Because if you're reading, let's say you're reading a romance novel, you are going to tend to keep your enunciations softer a little bit smoother. They're generally not going to be as harsh. There won't be as much of a staccato kind of, I don't want to say clipped because that's what it's called when I mentioned earlier the square wave where the sound wave goes beyond the top and bottom of the thing and you get the square wave. That's called clipping. And so, you don't want to do that. But if you're doing sci-fi, a lot of times you're dealing with technobabble, and you want to try to enunciate that very clearly to the point that you do not blur your words as much as normal. Anyone who lives in Texas, side note, anybody who lives in Texas no, never mind. I was going to say, send me some Big Red because I've been craving Big Red, but I think there's a liquor store nearby that can order me the syrup. Just get a 5-gallon box of the syrup, and then I'll just use our soda stream to just make, I just started drooling, to make Big Red as much as I want. Anyway, side thing. Right. And yes, types of work. For example, if you're doing what I believe Arv would call speculative fiction, which I guess is sci-fi, fantasy, mystery, whatever, versus doing something like documentaries, or although I think documentaries are mostly visual, but or you're doing what I was talking about earlier about training manuals and medical texts and whatnot. You generally want to keep those fairly crisp, and keep everything. And for those, yes, you can remove the breath sounds because you're not telling a story. In that case, you are literally reciting the words on the page. You don't need to make them entertaining. You just need to make them clear. And so that requires a different type of narration. You don't need to be in character as much. So yes, depending upon the thing, that thing, what you asked about doohickey. From Echo Alpha X5. If you could RP a different character in the Adventures in Middle-earth campaign, from the very start, what would you be? And you can't repick Tony Berzeri. Or anything about him at all. There was, oh God, what was it? And the book is right there. I could open it, but it might have been one of the Men of Bree, maybe. There were a couple of things in there that I was looking at that I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I was like, no, I want to be this big dude with a deep voice, just because that's more fun for me. But probably one of the Men of Bree, I think. Okay. Do they actually work with just one or two up like that? What are you talking about? I know it's a while ago that you asked that question. So. An EverQuest map. Yes, this one right here. Yeah, that's from Ultima. Sorry, I'm finally catching up with stuff. Question from The Rising Tides. God, I love your accent so much. Sorry. Keep it professional, Tren. Um, if you could get the gig to voice any character from any piece of media in a new audiobook, what would it be? In a new audiobook? Or whatever? Because when I first started out, I wanted to, first and foremost, do video games. And then animation after that. And then maybe an audiobook every now and again. But everything is reversed. So I do audiobooks all the time. I occasionally get to do a piece of animation, and on very rare occasion, I get to take part in a video game. So it kind of flipped around the other way. Um, so I'm going to go for audiobook first. Um, I think that, and much like with BattleTech, for a long time they did abridged audiobooks. And now we're going back through and we're recording the unabridged stuff because the abridged books suck. Or at least the abridgementismosity sucks. And it's much better to get the full thing. Um, so if The Sleeping Dragon was, and it's one of my absolute favorite. I read it so many times growing up because it's about a bunch of college kids who get, teleported to a D&D world, but it's not fluffy and nice like the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. It's fucking awful. It's by Joel Rosenberg, The Sleeping Dragon. It's the first book in the series for the Guardians of the Flame series. I would want to be somebody in that. I don't know if I could handle being the voice of Elegon, the dragon. There is a scene in, I think, the third book where he's getting ready to murder a a a thief, a bandit, something, who has just slaughtered a village, men, women, children, everybody, including a little girl that Elegon liked very much. I can't even talk about the scene because it's just, I'm gonna just tears are gonna start. When he's telling the guy right before he torches him, spoilers, that I cannot read the thing. I can't see the text. It takes me like 20 minutes to get through that page because the tears well up and blur all the text and I can't read it. I would not. It would take me like a month to record his lines for that piece. Which is, anyway, that or the Spellsinger series. I mean, it's already been done again as an audiobook, but if that was ever redone, I would love to voice anybody in that. Really. Any of the Dragonlance novels. A lot of Dungeons and Dragons kind of themed stuff going on. Yeah. So if it was something that wasn't audiobook related, when Critical Role does their next, because the animated thing for Critical Role, which if you didn't see it on Amazon, it was great. It's really good. The Legend of Vox Machina. They're gonna do another block of that, and oh man, I would love to be anywhere in that. Anywhere in that, it would just be awesome. Yeah. Okay. So that would be that one for Mr. Tithes. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Helped with some stuff. It's like Star Trek 3. An anacolic. Okay, yeah, we're talking about the thing. Blah, 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 pineapple habanero mead. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Wrong verb. Never mind. Focus, Tren. Focus. So, right. Other questions. Oh, Elegon. So much. I've been thinking, jumping back to the Guardians of the Flame series and the Sleeping Dragon in particular. the scene at the end where they wake the dragon, where the dragon winds up waking. The sleeping dragon wakes up. Spoilers. And I think it's in the second book. Elegon tells him, it's like, no, he's going to be awake long after your great great grandchildren are dead. You're not, you're not getting in there again. And I found myself thinking, can I just, because I feel bad that this dragon is under this mountain, that he's been sleeping there so long that this mountain grew up around him, and I'm like, he's been alone in there for so long. And I'm like, can I just like take a herd of sheep in there to him and say, hi, I'm bringing you something to eat. Not me, I hope. Something. I just feel so bad for him being in there all by himself. Okay. I'm finally one fish, two fish, the end. That's where I am trying to, oh God. I don't know, Trendanus Thordak? I don't know. I mean, they'd put a lot of effect on my voice if I did that. Answer a question in the voice of a Guardians of Flame character. Not that one. Not. Let's see. What else? Are there any questions after this? Oh, another Isla question. Thank you. What advice would you give for authors who want to do their own audiobooks, especially if they aren't performers in that sense? That is a very good question, because there are quite a few authors who feel that they don't have the finances to pay an audiobook narrator. And in a lot of cases that may be true, especially with the pandemic. We saw a lot of authors, people were stuck at home. So it's like they couldn't go to work. So what are they going to do? A lot of people moved to trying to be authors because, maybe they had a bunch of stories that they wanted to get out of their heads or whatever. People moved to writing and moving to narrating or voice acting in general. It was two of the really big things that people could consistently do while they were at home. And so we saw explosions, in those two things as people were trying to find some way to be able to keep making money. Unfortunately, they would buy I think my first microphone was a USB, I think it was called a Natty, N-A-T-Y. It might be Blue Yeti that makes those, or the Blue microphones that makes the Natty, I think. And it was it picked up sound from all over the place. It was definitely, with this one, like you guys were saying at the beginning of the thing, if I'm over here, you guys can't hear me very well because I'm not on the mic. The Natty would pick up everything in this room, and it was horribly hissy, and it was awful. Not the answer to your question, however. As the author, you know the story and everything that isn't written around the story better than anybody else does. You know the characters better than anybody else does, which is great, but sometimes that puts you too close to it. And Jennifer Brozek, at one point, she mentioned to me, I guess it was probably 2 or 3 months ago, when she was talking about editing and whatnot. And I learned a long time ago that if you read your stories out loud, it pipes the text through a different part of your brain, because you're not just reading it in your head anymore. Because inside your head, you know what the thing is supposed to say. You understand the intent of what you wrote. And your brain will sometimes autocorrect something that's on the page that shouldn't be written that way. And mistakes and whatnot will get glossed over. And so if you read them out loud, you will find mistakes that you never realized were there. I learned that firsthand when I was in a writing group with Kyle Gold and a bunch of other local furry authors in the Bay Area. And I was sitting on the floor in his townhouse, and he's like, okay, go ahead and read it. And I started reading it in my head. He's like, no, read it out loud. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I started reading it, and I didn't even get through the first 2 sentences before I spotted an error that I had never noticed before. And I was like, oh, hang on. He's like, no, don't edit, just read. And I'm like, but it's wrong. It's not, it's wrong. I need to fix this. He's like, don't worry. Trust me. We all found it when we read it. It's in our notes. We will give you. just read. And so I continued reading, and I found shit everywhere. I was like, okay, I will read out loud from now on. The other thing that Jennifer Brozek said, to finally get around to the whole thing, is that she pipes her stuff through a text to speech engine, because it absolutely reads what is on the page. It doesn't know the intent of the thing. It only reads exactly what is there, exactly the words that are on the page. And she said that even after reading out loud, she'll be listening to it, and she's like, oh, no. And I'm like, oh, my God, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I will have to remember that, too. I mean, I don't really write that much anymore. But, yeah. So, back to the Writhing Tides question. You're too close to it. And you need, oftentimes, an external voice. Because, especially when you're first starting out, you will not realize how similar the voices that you are using are to each other. And it's not until you've listened to it for the 15th time that you're listening to it and you're like, wait a minute, these two characters sound the same. It's when you've gotten to a point that you are so sick of hearing your own voice, that's when you start to really hear it. And you start to pick out things like, oh, these two sound very close. And that becomes a real problem when you've got like 7 or 8 characters in a room sitting around a table all talking to each other and they all sound the same. That is a problem. So it's generally better to get someone else to go in, because especially if they're a voice actor, they will figure out how to make these voices all individual and distinct from each other. But if you want to, if you're an author who wants to narrate your own audiobooks, you can absolutely do that. But you have to listen to it with a very critical ear and make sure that you make your characters sound distinct from each other. Live swing, what you said with the Guardians of the Flame having some horrific elements. It's important to remember that when Joel Rosenberg wrote that, he had been introduced to D&D by friends, and he had never played it before. And he played it for like a couple of years, maybe. And there was a point where he was like, oh my God, it would be so cool to live in a world like that. And one night, he snapped awake out of a cold, dead sleep, sat up and was like, no, that would be awful. And he started thinking about all of the horrible things that would happen in a world like that. And that's when he started writing The Sleeping Dragon. That's what led to him writing it. And when you go through and you read it, and you're like, oh, God, this, I mean, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, right, okay, so from Echo Alpha, do you know of anywhere I could procure a very detailed map of Faerun? Yes. But also other continents on the planet itself, which the planet is called Toril, by the way, Toril. Right, so Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, thank you. I was like, what is that called? And Neverwinter Nights. You also need to consider what version of D&D you want. This is the map of 3.5. If you were to get a 4th edition map, there would be a big hole right here where all of this got ripped out by the gods, and there's just a giant lake there. Well, sea. And eventually, for 5th edition, they put it back. And that's when the Dragonborn showed up. It was in 5th edition. And that's where they showed up, was right there. And so they're very different maps. But if you just do a search for like either Faerun 5th edition map on Google, because that's where I got this, not 5th edition, but I did a search for, Faerun map, and I found this file, which originally was published as a map in Dragon magazine, but it was cut into 4 pieces, and so they were inserts in different issues of Dragon magazine, and I had 3 of them, and I was on the hunt for years trying to find that 4th segment, and I found the issue like on eBay, and I was just about to click buy, and I said, wait a minute, and I pinged the guy and I said, does this have the map insert? And he's like, no, it doesn't. I'm like, ugh. And so like, good thing I didn't buy it. And after I found the fourth piece, and I got to the point where, and they, unfortunately, the four pieces that I had, they weren't all cut like on the same die, so they didn't line up quite properly. But it was my intention to cut them, to tape them all together once I got them lined up, and then like frame them or something. And then I found this, which is the exact same image that came from. I found this in software form as an image at a gigantic size. And I went to a friend of mine who worked in a poster shop in San Jose, and I said, "Can you print this out for me?" And he's like, "Yeah, how big do you want it?" And I'm like, "Okay." And so he printed me this on vinyl. And it was after that that I realized that this was 3.5. Oh, damn it. And so I started searching for the 5th edition map, and I found one that is even bigger than this. And I asked my buddy, this was right near the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm like, "Pepe, here's the new file. Can we print this one out?" And he's like, "It'll be bigger than the one I gave you. It's going to be, it would basically be the size of this wall." And I'm like, "No, not, that's too much. Let me sum up. I don't want it to that big. Just a little bit bigger than this is fine." Nah. But the pandemic had just started, and they weren't going to the office, and I still haven't followed up on him. And of course, now I think he moved to Colorado, so I can't get him to. Anyway, Google search. I guess that's the TLDR of it. Yeti. I think it was no. Natty, Naty was I don't know. It's not in here. I think it's in the hall closet or something, or maybe it's one of my many cargo totes that I have not unpacked since I moved in 7.5 years ago. But I think Blue, the microphone company, makes the Natty, Naty. Let's see here. More questions. True, you have, and I'm an okay writer in short stints, little vignettes. Yes, I can do, but like get to like longer than a page or two or maybe four. It's like I have what I thought was going to be an awesome BattleTech novel that was full of furries, and I'm like, when I started learning more about BattleTech, I'm like, how the hell do I justify this? And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, no, it's not going to work. No, no, no. And then I was telling John about it at one point, and he was like, no, that could actually work. Basically, they were running from some clan that was trying to chase them down, like a trial of annihilation, and they pushed their jump drive too far, and they went way beyond the 30 light year range and wound up in a place that they just called Oasis because it was way out of, it's just a star system way off by itself. And when they got there, all over the ship had blown up, and it was horrible and nasty, and they didn't have enough genetic material to continue using their iron wombs to kind of keep their people alive. And so what they wound up doing was drawing genetics from the wildlife that lived there to try to give themselves more biodiversity to be able to survive on this planet. And the unintended side effect was that they all started growing fur and muzzles and stuff like that. And so they, thousands of years later on, were basically furries. It was called Deus Machina, was what I wanted to call it. Okay. How big can you make it? I presume you mean this. I don't remember. Finally answer that question. Oh my God. That on metal? Eee. Okay. Just make it Warhammer. Sure. Okay. And that brings me to the present thing of where the chat is. And here we are at 3 hours. Ah, how beautiful. Okay. So like the entire last hour or 45 minutes has nothing to do with narration. Well, almost nothing to do with narration. It would be. I mean, I'm sorry, the rising tides. I think it would be really rad, but I'm biased because I'm a furry. But the opening sequence is basically the star captain is riding in the elevator down. He's just gotten out of his mech, and he's riding in the elevator down to the floor. And there's one of the techs that is in there with him, and he's facing the back of the elevator. He's not facing towards his mech because they have kind of a superstition that if you look at it when it's damaged, you climb out of it, don't look at it. You walk away from it and let the techs get in there and work on it. Once they're done, then you can look at it. But if you look at it, it's bad luck to look at your mech when it's messed up and everything. So he's facing the back of the lift, and he can sort of see the reflection, but it's really blurry because it's like barely polished metal and whatnot. And at one point, he's like, I really messed her up this time. He's like, it's nothing I can't fix. It'll be fine. And eventually, like he's the tech is like, what is it with you guys in your mechs? It's like you treat them like they're people, or somebody that you love. And it's like, we do, because they are. These machines are very important to us. They're and the tech eventually is like, what's her name? And he turns to look back towards her. And he's like, as he's turning, he's like, Megan. Her name's Megan. And the tech is like, that's a good name. And he's turning and he says, it's the best knit. And he gets about that far. And there was a piece of shrapnel stuck under his clavicle. And when he turned, it sliced through his carotid artery and he dropped. He survived. They managed to get him to hospital and everything. But the curse continues. It's bad luck. Do not look at your mech when you get back from a mission. And so that's pretty much where that scene ended, and I never went back to it to continue it. But I had ideas for where it was going to go, and it was going to be so much fun. But eventually, I was like, I don't care that much. Let's see, is that the? Oh yes, Rock God. That is the one that we use for our in-house game. I haven't printed it out yet, but that thing is huge, huge, and it's already got hexes on it, which hexagons are bestagons, and yeah, it's a great map. That's the one I like for 5th edition. Huge. Okay, so here we are at what for me is 7:57 in the evening. We're right at the end of the point where we were going to finish streaming, something like that. Yeah, that's a sizable image there. That's almost 1-to-1. No, it's not 1-to-1. That was I think it was Stephen Wright in one of his comedy routines. He said he had a life-size map of the United States. Last summer he folded it. Yeah, good stuff. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I will now be auctioning off R's stream key for those of you who... Oh, crap, he's still here. Okay. Well, never mind. We'll just edit that out of the narration. And, yeah. Now, I can't read what he said, so get scrolled off. This has been great, Tren. Thank you so much. Yeah, whatever. We're doing it, folks. Please spread the word. And remember, big important thing, like if you're going to send out a tweet about the Kickstarter, cool. If you're going to retweet someone else, don't just retweet it, quote tweet it, and add a comment. That helps a lot more. Even if you're like, yeah, what he said, or whatever, like that. I guess it was a Tom and Jerry cartoon or something like this. The big bulldog is walking along. He's got the little bulldog. It's like, yeah, you want to go chase some cats, Spike? Huh? You want to go chase some cats? Kind of thing. And like every time the bulldog says something, he's like, yeah, what he said, kind of thing. Even if that is just your quote on the tweet, just say, yeah, what they said. It's cute. It's really cool. Or if you want to play reverse psychology, there's a this story's too cool for you losers. You guys don't want to. Nah. You guys are just no. it's pussyfooting around too much. You can't handle a story about a religious assassin who's like Jason Bourne from 15th century Rome, is trained in sonic magic. It is 15th century, isn't it? I hope it's 15th century. I always get that number wrong. Whatever. I once said it was 13th century. I'm like, oh my God, that is so not right. So I'm going to let you guys go. And I forgot to do the important hashtag. Oh, you mean the hashtag Gray with an A, Gray, Gray Assassin? It's got 2 asses. How awesome is that? You get to put a hashtag with 2 asses on Twitter, and they're not going to stop you. That's awesome. Gray Assassin. Hashtag Gray Assassin. I'm sure Arv is thrilled that I'm talking about, this stuff. Right. So, go out there and tweet it. Quote tweet it. Post it to Facebook. Something, because I'm not going there. I hate that place. And if you need to, tell Elon Musk, hey, why don't you, if you're going to back something, back out of something, just, back this Kickstarter. Who knows? Maybe we'll include a scene with, a Tesla Model 3 in the 4th book. All right. So, good night, everybody. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time, probably on tomorrow. On tomorrow? Yeah, see you tomorrow for Infinity and Beyond. That's what it's called. Infinity and Beyond. Right. So, bye-bye now. Love you guys.